Salgado Araujo, forgive me, my Spanish is, from third grade, literally, did what he'd done nearly every morning for 35 years. He got up at 5 a.m., kissed his wife goodbye, loaded his van, drove off to his picked up his construction crew in Magnolia Park. This is, the heart of Houston's Mexican-American community. He'd raised 3 sons in that city. They became a teacher and 2 engineers. He had no criminal record. He was partway through the process of getting legal. They'd already taken his biometrics and fingerprint. And by 7 a.m., he was lying down on Canal Street with a bullet in his abdomen, crying desperately for help and in pain because he had been shot by a masked ICE agent. He died at the Pentob Hospital. ICE says he rammed their vehicle with his weaponized, but, there's apparently no visual evidence of that. So, and even the president of Mexico is pissed off about this. Which brings us to the question that, people keep asking. They occasionally call in to hear and ask, and certainly bring it up a lot on social media, is, are we in a police state yet? And if so, how would we know? I lived in Germany for years, back 86, 87. I was working with Salem International, an international relief organization. I spent part of those 2 years in Herheim, a little town that literally was on the East German border. I crossed through Checkpoint Charlie into East Berlin, saw that. My old buddy Armin Lehmann was the teenage Hitler youth who brought the news to Hitler that the war was lost, stood outside his bunker as he shot himself. My mentor and employer in Germany, Gottfried Müller, was in the German intelligence service, in the Nazi intelligence service. He renounced Nazism. He got captured by the British in Iran and spent the whole war in prison. Basically, and came out and devoted his life to peace work. So, I knew people who were actual Nazis, Nazi youth and a Nazi intelligence officer and several others, actually. And I knew a lot of people who had just kind of kept their heads down. And this was back in the 70s and 80s, and those people were still around. Most of them are dead now. But they all told me essentially the same story of how this all begins. How do you know you're in a police state? I mean, Germany didn't announce it just one day. It began with forbidden thought, verbotener Gedanke. You may not think like this. So let's just go through the inventory. What is a police state? Let's just go through the list. Just straightforward stuff. A police state is a nation where the police answer to the leader rather than to the law, and where nobody outside the leader's circle is permitted to hold the police accountable. It's a nation where they can arrest, beat, torture, imprison, and even kill with both anonymity and impunity. Renee Good, Alex Preddy, now this recent murder in Texas, going after an Olympic canoeist for reaching into the reflecting pool. I mean, it goes from the most extreme to the most banal. Or banal, or however you say that word. And they're refusing, the feds are refusing to give the evidence of these murders over to the Hennepin County Attorney General, Mary Moriarty. Okay, number one. Number two, a police state imprisons its dissidents and makes the sentences spectacular so everyone gets the message. There was a local book club that held a protest on the 4th of July outside the Prairieland ICE Detention Center. Now, one of the guys brought a gun and shot at the ICE officers after they pointed a gun at him, apparently, from everything we can figure out. His name was Benjamin Song. That guy got 100 years in prison. It's a lot, but hey, he pulled out a gun and shot at a cop. But nobody else did. Marcela Ruda, who was a doula and who was acquitted by the jury of every violent count against her, acquitted, got 70 years in prison. 5 other people from the book club were also acquitted of any violence, and they got 50 years each. And Daniel Estrada, who was a Denton teacher and a poet, who literally wasn't there, got 30 years in prison for moving a box of anti-fascist magazines from one house to another. 30 years. Number 3, a police state criminalizes thought itself, as well as any expression of or action on that thought, no matter how otherwise legal it may be. Last September, Trump signed NSPM 7, National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, saying that indicators of domestic terrorism, that's a verbatim quote, include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity. And that anti-fascism is the organizing, rallying cry of domestic terrorists. The FBI has since retooled its 200 joint terrorism task forces to look toward the American left rather than foreign terrorism. And they have this new Joint Mission Center that is looking into the funding of the anti-Trump protest movement. We see them going after the Southern Poverty Law Center. Number 3, a police state knocks on your door in reaction to your opinions, should you dare to express them out loud or in print. In January, a Rochester software professional named Daniel Strever sent a 3-paragraph email to Todd Lyons, who was then the director of ICE. It said, and I quote, "You are a monstrous human being and will go down in history as America's Reinhard Heydrich the Butcher. You will torment yourself until your last day on earth." It contained no threats. There was no mention of violence. But 5 months later, 2 federal agents rang his doorbell while he was in Finland with his 7-year-old daughter and gave his wife a document headed, "Warning, notice, you may be in violation of a federal law." And then they tracked him down in a New York City hotel where only his wife knew he was there and she hadn't told anybody, and tried to scare him also. He's now suing with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which could cause that group to end up, being under investigation like SPLC. The same week, federal agents confronted another person who a poll worker for something that she had posted on Instagram. Number 4, a police state builds a security force loyal to the leader and his oligarch cronies rather than to the nation. Well, I mean, you've got this quick reaction force that Trump has built within the National Guard. You've got ICE. Putin built something like this. He called it Rosa Vargardia. Hitler built something like this. It was called his Schutzstaffel. We remember them as the SS. Number 5, a police state needs a compliant press. And you don't have to negotiate to nationalize the networks when you can simply arrange for a friendly, morbidly rich oligarch to buy them. CBS, CNN, etc. Number 6, a police state rewrites the past. As George Orwell wrote, he who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Trump has signed this order restoring truth and sanity to American history, and they're tearing down the history of racism and slavery in the United States and so on. And finally, a police state controls the vote. And just yesterday, Trump fired these members of the Federal Election Commission, or the Federal Election Assistance Commission. And the Federal Election Commission itself, which has prosecutorial power, has been paralyzed. So are we in a police state yet? I mean, I'll leave it to you to make that determination. I think we are in the early stages of one. Not the very early stages, the middle early stages. And I think that the one thing that we have right now that the people in Germany did not have in 1934 is an election coming up that might be able to stop this. So make sure that you're registered to vote and that everyone you know is. And let your elected officials know what you're thinking about these things.
We say fight back!
Subpoenas Times journalists and eyes fencing off Lafayette Square. Rubio governs Venezuela as a viceroy. Settlers detain rural Khanna, and the CDC cuts unleash a parasite. Good morning. This is the Commonwealth Report, news for the public, not the powerful. You can follow us at commonwealthreport.news. Who's afraid of reporters doing their jobs? The Justice Department just sent federal agents to the homes of 4 New York Times reporters. Their crime? They wrote that the new Air Force One, a Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar, lacked the anti-missile defenses of the old plane, and that the Secret Service urged Trump to fly the older jet home from the NATO summit. Now those 4 journalists are ordered before a grand jury in Manhattan this week. The Times calls it a brazen act meant to intimidate. The subpoena came from Jay Clayton, the very prosecutor Trump just tasked to be our director of national intelligence. This follows cash settlements squeezed out of ABC and CBS and legal threats against the Post and the Journal. The Justice Department insists the reporters aren't the targets, only the people who leaked to them. When the government starts knocking on reporters' doors at night, the free press itself is on trial. Why is Trump fencing off the People's Park? Trump wants a permanent fence around Lafayette Square, the park right across from the White House, where Americans have gathered to protest since the early 1900s. Actually, the early 1800s. His plan lets officials slam the park shut whenever they decide there's a security risk. He also wants a brick walkway torn up because he's worried protesters might pick up bricks and throw them. Suffragettes marched there. War veterans demanded their bonuses there. It's federal land, and Trump is skipping the historical reviews the law requires, just like he did when he demolished the East Wing. One preservation leader calls the square the national symbolic heart of the public's right to speak. Wall off that square, and you wall off the First Amendment itself. Is Marco Rubio now the Viceroy of Venezuela? The New York Times reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been quietly running Venezuela for months. Ever since the American military seized President Nicolas Maduro back in January and hauled him to the United States, Rubio has controlled Venezuela's finances, its oil revenue, and its day-to-day government. The Treasury collects the money from Venezuela's exports, then doles it back out under strict conditions that Rubio sets himself. Diplomats have started calling him the Viceroy, the old title for colonial governors. A former Human Rights Watch director says Trump has turned Venezuela into an effective American colony. One historian says we're back in the dollar diplomacy days of the 1910s, when Washington ran whole countries as banana republics. Rubio told the Senate there's no war and no occupation. We did this to Hawaii once. Now we're apparently doing it again. The rich got a handout. Working families got the bill. 1 year ago, Trump signed his One Big Beautiful Bill. Now the receipts are in. A new report finds the richest 1% will pocket $117 billion in tax cuts this year, an average windfall of about $66,000 each, more than the entire bottom 60% gets combined. To pay for it, Republicans cut over $1 trillion from Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the biggest health care cuts in American history. Nearly 4 million people have already lost food assistance after a $187 billion cut to food stamps. Hospitals are closing. A Pennsylvania lawmaker and emergency doctor says, quote, he's never seen a more dangerous and purposeful attempt to make people sick and hungry. That's not a budget, that's a robbery. Machine guns detained Congressman Khanna in the West Bank. Congressman Khanna went to the occupied West Bank last week to see a Palestinian village that Israeli settlers had destroyed, the school and the homes flattened, its families driven out by settler raids 2 years ago. While he stood there, armed settlers rolled up carrying American-made M4 rifles, blocked the road, kicked his van, and detained him and other Americans. When Israeli soldiers arrived, Khanna says they sided with the settlers and kept the group held for over an hour until the American embassy stepped in. The Israeli military claims its soldiers dispersed the settlers and reopened the road. On national television Sunday, Khanna said flatly, quote, the IDF is lying. And he asked the obvious question, if they'll do all this to an United States congressman on camera, what are they doing to Palestinian families when nobody's looking every single day? Why can't anyone track the explosive diarrhea? And finally, a strange alert. A nasty parasite called cyclospora is sweeping the country right now, and it causes what doctors politely call explosive diarrhea. One Denver man said he, quote, wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy after 5 days of running through the bathroom over 40 times a day. More than 1,000 people are sick in Michigan alone, with cases in dozens of states. So why can't the government find the source? Well, because last year, Elon Musk's efficiency crusade and Robert Kennedy Jr. gutted the CDC program that tracked it. For 30 years, that program watched 8 foodborne germs. Now it watches only 2. The same cuts brought back a flesh-eating cattle parasite and fired the scientists watching the bird flu. They called it saving money. The country's paying for it now, one bathroom trip at a time. And that's the way it is today, Monday, July 13th, 2026. I'm Thom Hartmann. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, top of the Monday to you. It's a brand new week. Another day, another dead person. ICE just shot another person, apparently dead, in Biddeford, Maine. We're watching the story. I'll keep you up to date as we learn more. The residents are kind of freaking out. But, hey, look, this is what happens when you live in a police state. And that's increasingly what America is becoming, as we discussed on Friday. Lindsay Graham is dead. I'll get to that in a second. Also, the oligarch's warning. This fall, America decides which of Russia's 4 futures to follow. Who's afraid of reporters doing their jobs? A lot to talk about here in the first hour. Is Marco Rubio now the Viceroy of Venezuela in our second hour? Is Venezuela now a colony of America? And machine guns detained our friend Congressman Khanna in the West Bank. And why can't anyone track the explosive diarrhea that's now spreading across the country? Hint, hint, Bob Kennedy and Elon Musk. We'll get to that. And in our third hour, court reform just became a matter of survival. Sabrina Hake is going to drop by. And the rich got a handout, working families got the bill. So a lot to talk about today. With regard to Lindsey Graham, I just wanted to, my take on Lindsey Graham is that this guy always wanted to be a statesman, to be seen as a statesman, and really never was a statesman. He was really a beta looking for an alpha in all cases. He was the follower looking for the leader. And when he was following John McCain, when he was a part of the Gang of Eight, and John McCain had real principles. I didn't agree with all of them, but he had real principles. And so Lindsey Graham had real principles. And then John McCain died, and so Lindsey Graham needed somebody else to attach himself to, sort of like the lampreys on the Sharks. And so he attached himself to Donald Trump, and then, of course, he lost all his principles. So most recently, he was seen at Disney World with a Little Mermaid bubble wand. This is right after he'd talked Trump into bombing Iran and killing a whole bunch of little girls. And he has said that Israel should use nuclear bombs on Palestinians, that he has fought to strip abortion rights for American women. Trump turned it into all about Trump. Graham was supposed to be on Meet the Press, so Trump called in to Meet the Press and said, yes, I talked to him just before he died, and he said he's got the votes for the Save America, which is obviously a lie. I mean, Trump lies as easily as he breathes, so here we are. My op-ed today, my daily takeover at the Hartmann Report, is titled The Oligarch's Warning. This fall, America decides which of Russia's 4 futures to follow. And what got me started on this was a couple of things. The first is that Friday afternoon, the Trump administration released this formal proposal to ring Lafayette Square. Now, Lafayette Square is this park right across the street from the White House. It's where Trump had the National Guard tear gas people so that he could, at the end of his first term, so he could walk out there with a Bible, because there's a church on the other side of the park. He could walk out there with a Bible for a photo op. Remember that? That's Lafayette Square. People have been gathering to protest in Lafayette Square since John Adams became the first president to live in the White House, the second president of the United States, John Adams, in 1801. And which was the final months of his term, in fact. and it's just been, or perhaps it was 1800, but it's just been, I mean, this is where the suffrage movement, you know, during Alice Paul and her Silent Sentinels, they call themselves, these women who stood in Lafayette Park through the winter. I mean, just a continuous vigil demanding the right for women to vote, which ultimately led to the passage of the right, you know, of the 19th or 20th Amendment that gave women the right to vote in the United States. And but Trump, you know, he's preparing to steal an election. I think that's fairly obvious to everybody now. And if he pulls it off, there's going to be a lot of pissed off people, and they're going to be in the streets, and they're going to be protesting. And so he's just making sure that they can't get close to the White House. That's my take on what's going on. I mean, governments that trust their own people don't wall themselves off from them. Fortress states do. And that's why this op-ed or this article in the Economist magazine over the weekend just really rang. It just got me. I mean, it just, phew. This is an amazing article. And what they had done, there's the richest guy in Russia is a guy named Andrei Melnichenko. And, you know, he started out as a crook in college, running an illegal gambling operation with paid off the local police to be his protection. And he's become, you know, the biggest crook in Russia, or the biggest oligarch in Russia. But he's also a fairly thoughtful guy. He's a very, very smart man. The profile of him is amazing. And, you know, for 20 years, he had that deal with Putin where I don't involve myself in politics, you don't involve yourself in my business. And then Putin came after one of his businesses in 2023. And so Melnichenko gave $335 million to a private children's school for gifted children that operates under Putin's personal patronage, and suddenly all the charges got dropped against him. I mean, this is how Trump is doing things, right? Selling pardons, selling legislation. The fossil fuel industry, give me $1 billion and I'll cancel all those windmill projects. That kind of thing, right? That's a fully realized oligarchy. It's what Trump is trying to put into place here. It's what Putin has in Russia. And Melnichenko told The Economist that he can see only 4 possible futures for Russia. He said it could crawl back to a victorious West as a defeated vassal, but that would be like a Treaty of Versailles kind of scenario, and would be setting up a world war, just like the Treaty of Versailles set up World War II, number one. He said, number two, it could settle permanently into China's orbit as basically a source of resources with a faint appearance of independence. Number three, it can fragment into civil war with warlords, oligarchs and whatnot in regional areas fighting each other over pieces of a nuclear-armed state. Or finally, it can finish its transformation into essentially a North Korea kind of state, or I would argue something like East Germany, which Putin used to run. Putin was the head KGB guy in East Germany, and that's definitely the direction they've been heading. And that fourth scenario, according to this article in The Economist, is actually under serious discussion in the Kremlin. So what does, and Melnichenko has a fifth solution. He says, my suggestion is that you just let the oligarchs run the country. We know what's best. And of course, you know, we've got oligarchs here saying the same thing. You know, Peter Thiel saying that democracy and freedom are incompatible. So I think that there's a parallel here for the United States, that we're looking at a few options. The first is aristocratic dictatorship, right? Where Trump finalizes our alliance with Moscow, Beijing, and the Gulf monarchies and breaks all our ties with other democracies. The second is a civil war, which, you know, there's some right-wingers who've been pushing for this forever. The third is a slow imperial decline, which Trump has already begun, like Great Britain experienced after the 2 world wars. And the fourth is a democratic renewal. Now, this is an option that's not available to Russia right at the moment because they never really had a functioning democracy. And most of the people who could bring it about in Russia are now dead or in prison. But here in the United States, it's still a possibility. We fought back the oligarchs in 1861. Abraham Lincoln took on the oligarchs of the Confederacy and beat them. And then we fought back the oligarchs again in 1933. Franklin Roosevelt took on the oligarchs and beat them. And, 80 years, between each of those things, and here we are 80 years out from the end of World War II, and the oligarchs are rising again. So the question is, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And this is my big concern, is that this might be our last chance to actually say, we're going to go down that road that Lincoln and FDR went down. We're going to defend democracy. We're going to rebuild the middle class. We're going to make America a functioning democratic republic rather than a corrupt, oligarchic, tin pot dictatorship like Donald Trump is definitely trying to create, and to a large extent has, in the United States right now. And that depends on you and me showing up, on all of us, showing up at the polls and waking up our friends.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's just about 16 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Don in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Well, I sort of in the vein of what you were talking about, there's sort of an upcoming crisis, where the decent people in this country are organizing. I mean, they fight back. They're not as coordinated, but they're trying.
Yeah.
And the great weakness I see of the Trumpian forces is they've gotten themselves into a real pickle in the Middle East. I mean, if they had just left well enough alone, they could have skimmed money off that for another 10 or 15 years. But they've pushed it, and now they're going to get pushed out. I mean, the Iranians ain't going to take this.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like them. I remember when they took power. They're not a great bunch of guys. But nonetheless, this is being fought on their turf.
Yeah.
And we lost half of our radars and advanced equipment in the first round of this.
Yeah,
and they moved it from all over the earth. They moved all that stuff, all that they could scrape together, and have brought it there again. And once again, have a pretty credible force. But I just can't imagine them winning because we're the interlopers, and the Iranians, whatever their faults, they live there.
Yeah, and now Trump has resealed off he's saying everybody can go through except the Iranians. And it's going to take a hell of a lot of ships in the region to defend that, and every single one of them is going to be a potential target of Iran. I mean, this Trump insisting on belligerence in every circumstance, regardless of cost, I think is real dangerous. I don't think this is going to end well for us.
Well, tell me, what role do you think conscription? Because there's a lot of talk on the right. And even on some people on the left about national service, and it doesn't have to be militaristic and everything. But they want conscription back bad because they're not doing so well in recruitment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that as warfare becomes more and more mechanical, more and more AI driven, more and more, drones and bots and things,
true.
I think the odds of a draft returning are pretty slim, as much as I think we should have one. I'm an advocate for it, but yeah, I'm with you. Don, thanks for the call. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, not too much, Tom. Hey, I wanted to mention something about, Trump taking away the Secret Service protection for John Bolton and why that's important. Bolton was a target of the Iranians for years. Yeah. Okay. And now Trump's, making a big drama out of supposedly they're targeting him. And look, Tom, I hear you on this the police state thing, but I think you're actually being generous, in my opinion. Again, I think it's more like nationalist socialism. I heard a Trump supporter just over the weekend say, if Trump can't get a win in Iran, he can't get a win in Ukraine, he's going to settle for a win in Cuba. I'm like, come on, man. What is more Hitlerian, for lack of a better word, than that?
Yeah, no,
these guys are just trying to make profit.
Yeah.
They're trying to make profit off of all this.
And look good. I mean, Trump needed a distraction from Epstein, so he got Iran, and now he needs a distraction from Iran, and probably Cuba will be that. But he's going to have a hard time getting distracting us from the fact that the price of oil is going back up again. You know.
Yep.
So it's
yeah, but the regime will even make money off of that, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They absolutely will. I mean, they've got pipelines and things. They don't just need the straits. Dave, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be back on the other side of the break with more of the news of the day and your calls in just 1 minute. It is 19 minutes past the hour. Stay tuned. The Commonwealth Report is journalism that works for you, not corporations, not billionaires. News for the public, not the powerful. Twice a day, we break down what matters to your life. Visit commonwealthreport.news and join us today. Stay informed, stay empowered. Human beings have a couple of unique characteristics. The first is that we can be very tender and loving and concerned and caring toward people we perceive as being our group, us. We can also be extraordinarily violent against people that we consider to be them, if we think of them or this other as a threat. Probably the classic example of this is Adolf Hitler convincing Germans that, Jews were a threat to them and good Germans going along with the Holocaust. Well, this othering is built into our DNA. This is, ancient stuff. And the Republican Party, since the time of Nixon, when he started, picking up the white racist vote after Democrats laid it down in the 60s, the Republicans have been using this to try to other minorities in America as a political strategy. And this is really deadly stuff. There's a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. Is othering human nature's deadliest instinct? Check it out.
They're building fences around freedom, still where voices used to stand. When the powerful fear the people, they build walls across the land. History whispers through the silence, don't ignore the warning signs. Every fortress starts with someone saying everything is fine. The oligarch's warning, hear it loud. No king fears an empty crowd. First they buy the truth, then buy the law, then build the walls you never saw. If we don't stand, we'll lose it all. Freedom doesn't die, it falls. Russia's road was paved with billionaires trading liberty for gold. Now the same old map lies open, written in a story we've been told. A fence around the people's square, a government afraid to see the faces of the ones who gave their lives to keep this country free. Lincoln fought them, Roosevelt broke them. Democracy lives when ordinary people rise. The future isn't written, not if we open our eyes.
23 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Yeah, there you go. The oligarchs, they want our country. Well, they've got our country to a large extent, thanks to this, 5 corrupt Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the New York Times published this story on Wednesday that Trump was flying home from Turkey, from the NATO meeting, in the old Air Force One, rather than the Qatari bribe jet, where the Qataris, for 5 years they've been trying to sell this jet. It was a white elephant. Nobody wanted to buy it. And so they gave it to Trump and as a bribe. And, he gave them a bunch of goodies. But it doesn't have, it wasn't built from the ground up, right? It doesn't have all the ability to scatter, radar and heat-seeking missiles and stuff like that. And Turkey has a border with Iran, so they just thought, let's not do this. So anyhow, the New York Times reported this, and they, in their most recent reporting, Michael Grinbaum's writing at the New York Times, he's noting that the FBI actually came to the Times on Wednesday and said, we know you've got this story, please don't publish it because of national security. And so the Times said, well, we get that it could be embarrassing to Trump that his bribe plane doesn't have, the capabilities of one that's actually built to be Air Force One. That takes years, and it's a whole special thing. But other than embarrassing Trump, what is the national security concern here? I mean, convince us and we won't run the story. And the FBI said, screw you, we're just telling you not to do it, essentially. I mean, at least that's my read of it from reading the New York Times. And so what happened was that the four reporters who wrote this story, Julian Barnes, Eric Lipton, Tyler Pager, and Eric Schmidt, and Eric and both Erics have been on this program before in the past, by the way, got subpoenas to appear before a grand jury on Wednesday of this week. Now, you cannot, before a grand jury, invoke your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. You can't refuse to speak. They can put you in jail for that. They have, in fact, several years ago, there was a journalist who went to jail for months for refusing to reveal a source. And this could get very serious. So keep an eye on this on Wednesday. But this is, this is the federal government, this is the Trump administration, the Trump regime trying to basically intimidate our press, saying to reporters, and they didn't serve these guys at the office at the New York Times, which they should have. If you're saying we're going after the publication and what you're publishing, instead they went to their homes to terrify them. I mean, this is the whole point of it. And the Times is fighting back. And I'm guessing this will probably end up before the Supreme Court, and it might be another big loss. I mean, this a Washington Post reporter. This happened in January. FBI agents Hannah Nathanson. They took her phone, they took her smartwatch, they took her laptops. It can get pretty hairy when the government decides to come after you. So keep an eye on this story. I think this is a much bigger deal than most people are taking it to be.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Oh, and did I mention that ISIS anonymous masked armed thugs killed another person, this time in Maine? We'll be right back with your calls. Subpoenas Times journalists and eyes fencing off Lafayette Square. Rubio governs Venezuela as a viceroy. Settlers detain Ro Khanna, and the CDC cuts unleash a parasite. Good morning. This is the Commonwealth Report, news for the public, not the powerful. You can follow us at commonwealthreport.news. Who's afraid of reporters doing their jobs? The Justice Department just sent federal agents to the homes of 4 New York Times reporters. Their crime? They wrote that the new Air Force One, a Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar, lacked the anti-missile defenses of the old plane, and that the Secret Service urged Trump to fly the older jet home from the NATO summit. Now those 4 journalists are ordered before a grand jury in Manhattan this week. The Times calls it a brazen act meant to intimidate. The subpoena came from Jay Clayton, the very prosecutor Trump just tasked to be our Director of National Intelligence. This follows cash settlements squeezed out of ABC and CBS and legal threats against the Post and the Journal. The Justice Department insists the reporters aren't the targets, only the people who leaked to them. When the government starts knocking on reporters' doors at night, the free press itself is on trial. Why is Trump fencing off the People's Park? Trump wants a permanent fence around Lafayette Square, the park right across from the White House, where Americans have gathered to protest since the early 1900s. Actually, the early 1800s. His plan lets officials slam the park shut whenever they decide there's a security risk. He also wants a brick walkway torn up because he's worried protesters might pick up bricks and throw them. Suffragettes marched there. War veterans demanded their bonuses there. It's federal land, and Trump is skipping the historical reviews the law requires, just like he did when he demolished the East Wing. One preservation leader calls the square the national symbolic heart of the public's right to speak. Wall off that square, and you wall off the First Amendment itself. Is Marco Rubio now the Viceroy of Venezuela? The New York Times reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been quietly running Venezuela for months. Ever since the American military seized President Nicolas Maduro back in January and hauled him to the United States, Rubio has controlled Venezuela's finances, its oil revenue, and its day-to-day government. The Treasury collects the money from Venezuela's exports, then doles it back out under strict conditions that Rubio sets himself. Diplomats have started calling him the Viceroy, the old title for colonial governors. A former Human Rights Watch director says Trump has turned Venezuela into an effective American colony. One historian says we're back in the dollar diplomacy days of the 1910s, when Washington ran whole countries as banana republics. Rubio told the Senate there's no war and no occupation. We did this to Hawaii once. Now we're apparently doing it again. The rich got a handout. Working families got the bill. 1 year ago, Trump signed his one big beautiful bill. Now the receipts are in. A new report finds the richest 1% will pocket $117 billion in tax cuts this year, an average windfall of about $66,000 each, more than the entire bottom 60% gets combined. To pay for it, Republicans cut over $1 trillion to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the biggest health care cuts in American history. Nearly 4 million people have already lost food assistance after a $187 billion cut to food stamps. Hospitals are closing. A Pennsylvania lawmaker and emergency doctor says, quote, he's never seen a more dangerous and purposeful attempt to make people sick and hungry. That's not a budget, that's a robbery. Machine guns detained Congressman Khanna in the West Bank. Congressman Khanna went to the occupied West Bank last week to see a Palestinian village that Israeli settlers had destroyed, the school and the homes flattened, its families driven out by settler raids 2 years ago. While he stood there, armed settlers rolled up carrying American-made M4 rifles, blocked the road, kicked his van, and detained him and other Americans. When Israeli soldiers arrived, Khanna says they sided with the settlers and kept the group held for over an hour until the American embassy stepped in. The Israeli military claims its soldiers dispersed the settlers and reopened the road. On national television Sunday, Khanna said flatly, quote, the IDF is lying. And he asked the obvious question, if they'll do all this to an United States congressman on camera, what are they doing to Palestinian families when nobody's looking every single day? Why can't anyone track the explosive diarrhea? And finally, a strange alert. A nasty parasite called cyclospora is sweeping the country right now, and it causes what doctors politely call explosive diarrhea. One Denver man said he, quote, wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy after 5 days of running through the bathroom over 40 times a day. More than 1,000 people are sick in Michigan alone, with cases in dozens of states. So why can't the government find the source? Well, because last year, Elon Musk's efficiency crusade and Robert Kennedy Jr. gutted the CDC program that tracked it. For 30 years, that program watched 8 foodborne germs. Now it watches only 2. The same cuts brought back a flesh-eating cattle parasite and fired the scientists watching the bird flu. They called it saving money. The country's paying for it now, one bathroom trip at a time. And that's the way it is today, Monday, July 13th, 2026. I'm Thom Hartmann. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour and picking up your calls. What's on your mind today? Brian in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, Brian just dropped off the line. I don't know what happened there, but Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, you're on the air. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Always a pleasure speaking with you. You know, I understand Senator Lindsey Graham has passed away. Much condolences to his family and friends. The common ideal thing to paying respect for the dead. All right? Even though he and I never met the guy, but have idealistic differences. Okay, particularly with the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. But nonetheless,
which he pushed hard.
I'm sorry?
Which he pushed hard.
Oh, yes. No doubt. No doubt. I've never seen him with that kind of facial expression. But I just knew that Trump was going to politicize off of the man's death. And in fact, I'm going on record, and this is me, Michael from the Bronx, saying this, that Trump lied about Lindsey Graham, in which Mr. Graham is no longer here to confirm or defend.
Oh, I agree. There's no way Lindsey Graham called him up and said, I have the votes for the Save America Act, which is what Trump told
That's
Meet the
exactly
Nation.
where I was leading at. In fact, the last time Graham spoke on that, which I believe was a few months ago, he says he doesn't know or doesn't think he has the votes.
Right.
Take that into account. And then just a few days ago, like about a week, Tom Tillis, Senate Majority Leader of GOP, also said we don't have the votes.
Yeah.
So, common sense. If you didn't have the votes a couple of months ago, if you did not have the votes a couple of days ago, what the hell makes you think you got the votes now?
Right.
Which means let's cut the bull crap already and stop lying about somebody who's dead and cannot confirm.
Yeah.
I cannot allow a pass on.
Yeah.
No matter
well said,
what
Michael.
side of
I'm surprised. The media is dutifully reporting that Trump said that he talked with Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham had the votes for the SAVE Act, and they're not saying Trump lied. Well, the Washington Post documented 34,000 lies in his first term. That he lies as easily as he just breathes, as he talks, and they're reporting it as if it was real. And I agree with you. He's just lying through his teeth. Michael, thank you. Well said. Alexander in Brick Township, New Jersey. Hey, Alexander, what's up?
Hey, I'm talking about something today. I just got a notice saying that my DDD funding was cut because of the Medicaid cuts, and right now my friends that
is
are
DDD Department of Defense Disability? Is that
kind of Division of Developmental Disability?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay.
And this is people who have other forms of developmental disabilities who who need the additional assistance they need. They can't get the amount of hours they need because the budget cuts were cutting into that.
Yeah. So they're requiring they've introduced work requirements basically for your disability payments?
No, it's not disability payments. I'm going to be receiving a reduced amount of funding for home and community-based waiver services, which my mom is an employee for.
Right, for things that would help you with your disability. I get it.
Yeah.
So, Alexander, did you just want to let us know that this is happening, or was there a larger call to action?
Yes, I wanted to let you know that this is happening, and what can we do to explain to our congressman that this shouldn't have happened when it happened?
Yeah, I get it. This is what happens when the Republican Party decides, as they did back in 1981, and they have held ever since, that giving tax breaks to billionaires is the single most important thing on earth. And the second most important thing on earth is basically stripping any kind of benefits or services away from average working people or people with disabilities or people who live in areas that are heavily polluted or have environmental challenges or are deep in poverty or whatever, people in crisis. That it's not, the Republicans believe it is not the job of government to basically provide for, the pursuit of happiness in America, the general welfare, what the Constitution calls it. And so the solution is to not have Republicans getting elected, which is to vote for Democrats as much as possible and let them know. Mm-hmm. And you live in Brick Township, New Jersey. I'm not sure where that is. Do you know who represents you in the House of Representatives?
Brick Township is at the New Jersey Shore Point.
Mm-hmm. Are you represented by a Democrat or a Republican in Congress, or do you not know?
Congressman Chris Smith is actually my representative.
I would suggest you call their office and ask if they can intervene or if there are any other programs that you may be unaware of, and ask that they and in the larger sense that they try to do something to fix this problem. Alexander, I have to move along, but
VR cuts too, because right now the state is cutting vocational rehab funding at the state level to cover the shortfall from the federal Medicaid cuts.
Yep.
And right now, I don't know how much assistance I will be receiving from the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired with finding a job and getting the accommodations I need for work because of that, too.
Yeah, I get it. You've got 8 million people now who've lost their health insurance in the last year as a result of the big, beautiful bill. You've got 4 million people who have lost their food assistance. And a lot of the provisions, the $1 trillion cut to Medicaid and many of these other programs actually doesn't even kick in until the end of November of this year, after the election. The Republicans were very careful to make sure that the pain happened. It happens, in December and in January of next year, so that they can, once the Democrats are in charge, they can say, hey, the Democrats are in charge, and look at all this pain. But Alexander, thank you for sharing your story with us and letting us all know that this pain is here now, and I hope you can get through this okay. Thank you for the call. Mildred in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Mildred, what's on your mind today?
What's on my mind is Peter Thiel and Elon Musk.
Peter Thiel. Mildred, I'm sorry, your phone has that stuttering disease. I'm going to have to put you on hold, and I ask Jeremy. She's on line 2, Jeremy, to pick you up, and we'll call you back on a back line and get you on the air without, so people can actually hear you. John in Pittsburgh. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Obviously, a long-time listener since Vermont days. I have a connected dots problem I want you to comment on.
Okay.
As long as I've been listening to you, it took me a while to connect the dots. But I just was watching Ashley Baroness talking about Powell Memorandum. She puts it all in chronological order. I just finally connected all the dots. We're in the middle of a full-blown coup.
That's correct.
Which
started in the 80s. It was laid out in the 70s, but it started in 1981. Yeah.
And Lewis Powell is winning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Although he's passed away, but yeah, his side. His side is winning. Yeah. But, so far.
But how do we? Geez, it's a bloodless coup at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, sort of.
For the most part.
Tell that to Alex Petty and Renee Good.
Right.
But,
exactly.
But I get it. So we've been through this a couple of times before, John. We had oligarchs running North America in 1771, and we got the panic of 1771, which produced a long recession, about a 10-year recession. And that recession provoked the Boston Tea Party in 1773, which set the stage that caused Jefferson to stop thinking about how to be a good British subject and how to become independent, and the people around him. So that happened. Then 80 years later, the oligarchs in the South took over the South and ended democracy in the South, and then attacked the North and said, we're going to establish oligarchy for the North. Lincoln stopped that. So we won the Civil War. 80 years after that, the oligarchs rose up again with Warren Harding and Coolidge and Hoover becoming the presidents through the 20s. And again, we got an economic crash, just like the one in 1856, just like the one in 1771. We got an economic crash in 1929 that led to the Republican Great Depression. And the result of that election in 1932 was FDR being sworn into office in March of 33 and putting America back on track. So this will be the fourth time, essentially, that American patriots have confronted the oligarchs. The first two times it involved actual war within our borders, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War. The third time it involved a foreign war, World War II. And this time, I hope it doesn't have anything to do with the war, but those are the stakes, John. You're absolutely right. There is an oligarchic coup that was initiated with the Powell Memo in 71, that was executed by the Reagan administration in 81, and that basically the first president to seriously push back on was Joe Biden. And the things that he did are so unknown. Most people are unaware that he started enforcing the Sherman Act, and he raised taxes on rich people, and got this minimum 15% tax through incorporation. I mean, he did a lot of really great stuff, but nobody knows about it. And that's going to be the big battle, is, are we going to continue to be an oligarchy in the Supreme Court?
I want to throw one more name out there, Peter Coyote, and his film on the Powell Memorandum. Yeah. Peter has done great stuff. He's blurbed a couple of my books. So Peter's a good guy, and a great activist, and a great actor. A good man, a good and decent man. John, thank you for the call. It's going to be up to us this fall. I mean, we got to work our butts off.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
46 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Tom in Media, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I listened to your four options that this country could go to. And I think an option that probably has hopefully the biggest chance of becoming is a fifth option, which I call it the skilled middle class centrism, like a snapback. This kind of happened in the presidential elections last time, where skilled hourly workers, union and otherwise, they kind of rejected Kamala's plan and a lot of her other stuff because of what was in it. And I think that we're 35 million people. Skilled hourly workers making over $27 an hour. We're 35 million people, 30% of the households. And we are an informed electorate that votes, and we're a huge swing vote, especially in the battleground states. And the progressive vision, like of a $25 an hour minimum wage, we would never want that. That would crush us with inflation. 90% of us households have employer-sponsored health care. We don't want that taken away.
Well, stop for just a second here. You said raising the minimum wage would crush us with inflation. The minimum wage was put into place in, 1935, as I recall. It has gone up, if my recollection is correct, either 9 or 11 times. A couple of those times, it's been a real significant increase in the minimum wage. There has never, ever been any inflation that could be detected associated with the minimum wage. So why do you think that having a better minimum wage now would produce inflation? It doesn't make any sense. It would stimulate the economy, certainly, and make you guys richer.
Because it was gradual, Tom. This is a huge, enormous jump. And economists say they can't even tell how much push-pull inflation this would cause. Yeah. It's a real thing.
$25 ain't going to happen, Tom. You know it.
Huh?
You and I both know $25 isn't going to happen. Well, because they will compromise at 15.
That's not okay. Well, that's what they're pushing. Maybe 13. Okay, 14.
I mean, we've got now a $16 minimum wage here in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe 17 in Seattle. And every single time the minimum wage has gone up, and out here in Oregon and Seattle, We saw the minimum wage go from around $10 to around $15 real fast. And not only did it not produce any kind of local inflation, but it stimulated the economy, and everybody got, economically better off. It helped everybody, including people like yourself, high-income people like yourself.
You're a high-cost of living area. I'm talking a national floor, which means the person that wrangles the carts in an Acme in Alabama makes that. There's no question if you make that to floor. It's
large parts of Oregon and Washington State are relatively poor and rural. And they saw an increase in their minimum wage, and the prediction, I remember the battles, right? And the prediction was, these mom and pop stores are going to go out of business because they've got to be able to pay their workers, $8 an hour instead of 15, and you're going to, quack, 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 quack. None of it happened.
Well, I'm talking nationally, Tom. Nationally. Come on, Tom. If you do this nationally, first of all, daycare costs are going to explode. You're going to double day cost, people. So please.
I think daycare should be part of the commons. Tom, I got to run, but thanks for the call. And good points, by the way, about the size of the kind of essentially upper middle class. 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. You were promised something. Work hard, play by the rules, and you don't own a home, raise a family, retire with dignity. That was the deal, the American dream. So what happened to it? Well, here's the truth nobody told you. It didn't die, it was killed. And we know who did it, when they did it, and how they got away with it for almost 150 years. It starts with a lie buried in a court case in 1886. It runs straight through Reagan, and it's still robbing you blind right now. This wasn't bad luck. It was a crime, the greatest political crime ever told. Who Killed the American Dream? The Greatest Political Crime Ever Told. The new book by me, Thom Hartmann. It's time you knew who did it. Who Killed the American Dream by Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. 8 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Lori in Minneapolis. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hey, I have been listening to you so long. That means we're both old. It popped up on Messenger this morning. 888808. And the woman, she was calling from the United Kingdom, or she was speaking with an accent from the United Kingdom. And it sounded so scary. The Israelis are building factories on our American soil. Have you heard of that?
Well, I know that there are Israeli companies that operate in the United States, and there are American companies that operate in Israel. There's nothing new there. I mean, one of the largest solar companies, Solar Edge, which is all over the country, is an Israeli company. Go ahead.
But it's about weaponry.
Oh, yeah. The thing that concerns me is this proposal that's apparently in the National Defense Appropriation Act, the NDAA, the Pentagon bill that's coming up, that would merge aspects of the American military with the Israeli military. I don't think we should do that with any country, frankly. I have my own opinions about the Israeli military. I think they're out of control. I think Netanyahu is a fascist, and I'm very concerned for the future of a country that I have great respect and affection for. But but be careful, Lori, when anybody calls you. If you said you got a phone call?
Oh, no. It was up on it came up on Messenger.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So it's,
No. It just
be careful what you be careful what you click on.
That's why I called you.
Yeah. You can always look up the details online, and if it seems like it's something that's a genuine concern, let your member of Congress know. That's because it's going to go through the NDAA. Yeah, that's what we've got to do is let our members of Congress know. Lori, thanks for the call. Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind today?
Well, the environment is on my mind, Tom, because I think it's something that's part of the equation that's left off the conversation.
Yeah, increasingly.
Whether it's mainstream news or whatever. I mean, I want to remind everybody, Sanders said it, that the biggest existential threat to the world is global warming.
Yep.
So I think these NATO countries, if you look at not all the NATO countries, but a good part of them, they're using over 50% renewable energy. Spain 76, Portugal's 81, Denmark is 99, Norway's 91, the UK is 56. Why should they help? Excuse me. Why should they help Trump out in his war in Iran, and which is another war for oil?
Yeah. Well, that's what they're saying essentially. We didn't need this. We didn't want it. We don't. We're not going to go down that road with you. By the way, the United States, as of the end of last month, so far this year, has produced more electricity from solar than from coal. First time in history.
Yeah, I know we're getting up to like about 25%.
We still have a ways to go.
Energy here,
yeah. Well, in California, you had a couple of days there where you were. The entire state could have been supplied with renewable energy.
I'm in the Santa Cruz area where I am. It's Santa Cruz, San Benito, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, and I think Santa Barbara. We're in something called the Central Coast Power, and the power does come from PG&E. So whatever I don't produce for my solar rooftops is coming into the house from Central Coast Power. Yeah. It's all supposed to be renewable. Most of it is hydro. So we don't need the soil.
Yeah.
And, I think I called you up before and mentioned, like jet fuel. Honeywell makes sustainable jet fuel. It's plant-based. We got to get off the soil addiction, Tom. Yeah. It's going to bring our nation down. It's going to bring the world down.
It is, and not just through just the explicit deaths, but as a result of climate refugees, producing geopolitical instability, leading possibly to war. I'm very concerned. I share your concern, Dennis. I think it's a major disaster. Dennis, I got to run. It's the end of the hour. Thank you for the call. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Is Marco Rubio now the Viceroy of Venezuela? Is Venezuela now a colony of America? I mean, what the hell is going on here? We'll get to that in just a minute. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Subpoenas Times journalists and eyes fencing off Lafayette Square. Rubio governs Venezuela as a viceroy. Settlers detain royal Khanna, and the CDC cuts unleash a parasite. Good morning. This is the Commonwealth Report, news for the public, not the powerful. You can follow us at commonwealthreport.news. Who's afraid of reporters doing their jobs? The Justice Department just sent federal agents to the homes of 4 New York Times reporters. Their crime? They wrote that the new Air Force One, a Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar, lacked the anti-missile defenses of the old plane, and that the Secret Service urged Trump to fly the older jet home from the NATO summit. Now those 4 journalists are ordered before a grand jury in Manhattan this week. The Times calls it a brazen act meant to intimidate. The subpoena came from Jay Clayton, the very prosecutor Trump just tasked to be our director of national intelligence. This follows cash settlements squeezed out of ABC and CBS and legal threats against the Post and the Journal. The Justice Department insists the reporters aren't the targets, only the people who leaked to them. When the government starts knocking on reporters' doors at night, the free press itself is on trial. Why is Trump fencing off the People's Park? Trump wants a permanent fence around Lafayette Square, the park right across from the White House, where Americans have gathered to protest since the early 1900s. Actually, the early 1800s. His plan lets officials slam the park shut whenever they decide there's a security risk. He also wants a brick walkway torn up because he's worried protesters might pick up bricks and throw them. Suffragettes marched there. War veterans demanded their bonuses there. It's federal land, and Trump is skipping the historical reviews the law requires, just like he did when he demolished the East Wing. One preservation leader calls the square the national symbolic heart of the public's right to speak. Wall off that square, and you wall off the First Amendment itself. Is Marco Rubio now the Viceroy of Venezuela? The New York Times reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been quietly running Venezuela for months. Ever since the American military seized President Nicolas Maduro back in January and hauled him to the United States, Rubio has controlled Venezuela's finances, its oil revenue, and its day-to-day government. The Treasury collects the money from Venezuela's exports, then doles it back out under strict conditions that Rubio sets himself. Diplomats have started calling him the Viceroy, the old title for colonial governors. A former Human Rights Watch director says Trump has turned Venezuela into an effective American colony. One historian says we're back in the dollar diplomacy days of the 1910s, when Washington ran whole countries as banana republics. Rubio told the Senate there's no war and no occupation. We did this to Hawaii once. Now we're apparently doing it again. The rich got a handout. Working families got the bill. 1 year ago, Trump signed his one big beautiful bill. Now the receipts are in. A new report finds the richest 1% will pocket $117 billion in tax cuts this year, an average windfall of about $66,000 each, more than the entire bottom 60% gets combined. To pay for it, Republicans cut over $1 trillion to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the biggest health care cuts in American history. Nearly 4 million people have already lost food assistance after a $187 billion cut to food stamps. Hospitals are closing. A Pennsylvania lawmaker and emergency doctor says, quote, he's never seen a more dangerous and purposeful attempt to make people sick and hungry. That's not a budget, that's a robbery. Machine guns detained Congressman Khanna in the West Bank. Congressman Khanna went to the occupied West Bank last week to see a Palestinian village that Israeli settlers had destroyed. The school and the homes flattened, its families driven out by settler raids 2 years ago. While he stood there, armed settlers rolled up carrying American-made M4 rifles, blocked the road, kicked his van, and detained him and other Americans. When Israeli soldiers arrived, Khanna says they sided with the settlers and kept the group held for over an hour until the American embassy stepped in. The Israeli military claims its soldiers dispersed the settlers and reopened the road. On national television Sunday, Khanna said flatly, quote, the IDF is lying. And he asked the obvious question, if they'll do all this to an United States congressman on camera, what are they doing to Palestinian families when nobody's looking every single day? Why can't anyone track the explosive diarrhea? And finally, a strange alert. A nasty parasite called cyclospora is sweeping the country right now, and it causes what doctors politely call explosive diarrhea. One Denver man said he, quote, wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy after 5 days of running through the bathroom over 40 times a day. More than 1,000 people are sick in Michigan alone, with cases in dozens of states. So why can't the government find the source? Well, because last year, Elon Musk's efficiency crusade and Robert Kennedy Jr. gutted the CDC program that tracked it. For 30 years, that program watched 8 foodborne germs. Now it watches only 2. The same cuts brought back a flesh-eating cattle parasite and fired the scientists watching the bird flu. They called it saving money. The country's paying for it now, one bathroom trip at a time. And that's the way it is today, Monday, July 13th, 2026. I'm Thom Hartmann. starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to the second hour of our program. A lot to talk about here. Has Marco Rubio become the Viceroy of Venezuela? Have we become what we were back in 1910? I mean, this is the way Teddy Roosevelt ran the country, right? And William Howard Taft with this. I mean, you know, Teddy and his Rough Riders, and, you know, let's just take over poorer countries. And there was kind of it really was the McKinley presidency, you know, prior to that. But there was really kind of a downside back then, although we did get, you know, cheap pineapple from Hawaii when we took on the royal family there and ultimately incorporated Hawaii as a state. And we got cheap bananas from Central America and that kind of thing, and thus the phrase banana republic. But it's been a long time since the United States did this, where we just basically took over a country and ran it for our own benefit, not for the benefit of the people in the country. It's, you know, on an extractive basis. This was what Europe was doing with the whole world, you know, for 500 years. It's how North America got, quote, discovered by white people, only to discover that, hey, it was a fully occupied continent. And then, you know, got about the business of killing millions, perhaps tens or hundreds of millions of Native Americans. It's how Australia got discovered by white people, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But apparently and so this old colonial model, I mean, the Europeans repudiated this. You know, read King Leopold's Ghost about how the Belgians, you know, the just insane stuff that they did to the country that's now the Democratic Republic of Congo, or you know, the Spanish history of the conquistadors in the Americas, the British history of the conquest of North America, France's history of the conquest of parts of East Africa, or West Africa rather. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But we all thought that was behind us, and now we've got serious reporting over the weekend from the New York Times that Marco Rubio, who, by the way, speaks Spanish, so I guess that would probably make him a little more logical person for this role, has been functionally acting as the viceroy, that's the word that the Times used, of Venezuela, ever since we abducted their president. And now you've got, you know, Maduro and his wife are in a jail, and Trump is basically saying to them, if you will come out and say, yes, we manipulated your election with Venezuelan voting machine software, which, by the way, isn't a thing. It didn't. This is the conspiracy theory that came from nut cases like Laura Loomer and Candace Owens and whatnot. But nonetheless, that Trump. The story that we're hearing is that Trump is dangling a pardon for Maduro, or maybe even a return to power, if he'll simply say that he helped rig the 2020 election to keep Trump from getting back into office. But in the meantime, the Times said this is like parents handing out allowances to children. Why? Because, I'll just quote from the New York Times. Marco Rubio effectively controls Venezuela's finances, the distribution of its natural resources, and its government, and is deeply involved in the country's day-to-day operations, end of quote, while maintaining regular contact with Delcy Rodriguez, who is the acting president. She was formerly the vice president. And she's basically just doing whatever Rubio tells her to do. And she's in a situation where she has no choice, because we've set it up so that all of their oil revenue, which is the principal, you know, external revenue for the state, and internal as well, but in particularly the exports, all of that money is coming to the United States now instead of to Venezuela. And then Marco Rubio distributes that money back to Venezuela as he sees fit. And he specifies what Rodriguez may spend that money on and what she may not spend that money on. And, you know, frankly, we don't know the details of that, because none of this is public. It should all, I mean, if we're running another country, you would think that Congress at least would want to investigate that and find out what the hell's going on. And I suspect that if the Democrats take back the House, the Senate, or both, you are going to see an investigation like that. But right now, this is just wild stuff. And because Rodriguez can't spend a penny without Rubio giving it to her, essentially, and giving her permission. The New York Times said it's like parents handing out allowances to children. It gives Rubio immense leverage over Rodriguez, who depends on the money to pay workers and prop up the national currency. Orlando Perez, who is a professor of political science at the University of North Texas in Dallas, says this makes a mockery of Rubio's claim that, the whole thing with Venezuela was to return democracy to the country. Yeah, right. Kenneth Roth, the former head executive director of Human Rights Watch, said, Trump has turned Venezuela into an effective U.S. colony with Marco Rubio as the viceroy and Washington controlling the country's oil revenue and dictating major foreign domestic policies. Democracy has been relegated to a distant future. And then Bradley Simpson, a historian at the University of Connecticut, says, we are literally back in the dollar diplomacy days of the 1910s, when the United States invaded countries and took over their financial systems and ran them as effective colonies. And then he asked the question, where is the OAS, the Organization of American States? Where is the United Nations in denouncing this? And which is a good question. I think that, Trump has effectively cowed the world. I mean, he's taken on the UN. We're still not paying our dues to the UN. The UN is looking at maybe running out of money at the end of this summer. We're just bashing NATO. He destroys friends and enemies. Anybody who gets in his way, he just destroys them. And so I think these people are just afraid of it. Meanwhile, Congressman Khanna, who has, he's been on this program every other week, takes your calls for an hour, and has been doing that for, 6-7 years at least, Sean, something like that. And he learned about doing this from his friend and mentor, Bernie Sanders. Ro Khanna is about as close as you can get. I guess AOC is probably a little closer, but, to being kind of a protege of Bernie's. And, I don't think it's a secret that he would like to become president someday. And I think that there's a very real chance that he will run for president in 2028. And I think there's even a possibility he could become president. I was frankly surprised he didn't get in the Senate race in California, or the governor's race, which is a more traditional stepping stone to the presidency. But he's a guy in a hurry, and I have tremendous respect for Ro Khanna. I've gotten to know him both on the air and off the air, and this guy is really brilliant. He's genuinely brilliant. And he went over to Israel to visit a Palestinian village in the occupied West Bank. And the village is called Zerbet Zenuda. And it's a village, little Palestinian village that used to exist. And the local settlers came in and killed some people and drove people off and bulldozed the houses and tore down the school. And now it's just a bunch of empty, old house foundations that eventually the settlers are going to claim and build on. So Congressman Khanna and his party are there in a little bus, and the settlers show up with guns and start yelling at them and calling them obscenities and pointing their guns at them and kicking the wheels of their tires, the tires of their car. And this isn't the only time this happened. CNN reported the 4 settlers attacked a group of journalists, including CNN reporters, who were traveling through a different area north of the Palestinian city of Ramallah on Saturday. I've been to Ramallah. The settlers blocked the roads with their cars and began attacking the reporters' vehicles with wooden clubs and metal rods. This is, Israel is increasingly resembling South Africa, apartheid South Africa, where an awful lot of the apartheid was not enforced by the state, although the mechanism and structure was there. It was enforced by people like these Israeli settlers, by white people who simply, if they saw something black people had and they wanted it, they simply took it. And they killed whoever got in their way. It's incredible. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Meanwhile, the cuts to our federal government from Elon Musk and Bob Kennedy are coming home to roost. I'll tell you about that right after the break. And welcome back, Byron in Garland, Texas. Hey, Byron, what's on your mind today? Byron, watching us on YouTube in Garland, Texas. Maybe you're muted, Byron? Going once? Going twice? Mildred in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Mildred, what's on your mind today?
Well, what's on my mind is Peter Thiel and Elon Musk.
The PayPal mafia.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to go back to July of 2015 when the Russians hacked the Pentagon. And what I found out is that Epstein introduced Peter Thiel to this Russian man named Belyakov, who was close ties to Putin. And 7 days after the Russian hacking of the Pentagon, there was this man named Reid Hoffman. They hosted a private dinner in Palo Alto. But listen to who was at the meeting, and I have the photo right in front of me. Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Thiel, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Ed Boyden, Desiree Dudley, Michelle Ye, Priscilla Chan, Naveed Farouk, and Io Ito. And he was involved in a horrible financial scandal. And this was back in 2015.
Right.
Now, these people had this meeting. I have the photo right in front of me. You see all the people. Thiel, Musk, and Zuckerberg. They were acting as Russian assets. Why would they want to?
How are they acting as Russian assets, Mildred?
By having the meetings with Elon Musk and.
How does that make them Russian assets? What am I missing here?
Well, because it's been reported that Peter Thiel helped, did a lot of propaganda against Hillary Clinton, and there was an Epstein-Peter Thiel connection in Russia.
Yeah.
And then when Elon Musk went to Russia after the 2020 election for 2 years, and then the connections of these people, why are they having these private meetings? And with the power of Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and not liking our democracy and our way of government, they get our government contracts. And then when Ashley St. Clair said something about the
Elon Musk's former wife,
2024, and then it was said that on October the 30th of 2024, Elon Musk released 265 low orbit LEO V2 satellites, which has a direct-to-cell technology, which bypasses the air capping, which can protect.
I think that's just his internet service, isn't it?
No, it can go right into cell modems.
I'm going to have to, Mildred, I don't know a lot of the details you're talking about, so I'm going to have to do a little reading here. Thank you for thanks for the tip.
Okay, bye.
Okay, appreciate it. Just about 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in 60 seconds. Want news that actually has your back? The Commonwealth Report brings you honest, unfiltered reporting. News for the public, not the powerful. Twice daily updates that matter. Head to commonwealthreport.news and subscribe today. Take back your news. Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew both took cash bribes while they were in the White House. Since then, the Supreme Court, or at least 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, made it a lot easier for politicians to take bribes with their Citizens United decision, which basically legalized political bribery as long as it's done through campaigns or PACs or super PACs. But for some people, there's just never enough money, right? Donald Trump has been running small-time hustles to make money for decades, selling sneakers, Bibles, steaks, vodka, water. But now he's hit the big time. He's got these fungible tokens, right? These fungible crypto assets, which are basically just digital pictures of Donald Trump that say fight, fight, fight. And he has turned them into an $8 billion machine. His wife is in on this too, with his Trump coin. It's a new way that foreign powers and billionaires in the United States can just shovel money into Donald Trump's pocket. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled Presidential Payola, The Evolution of Political Bribery. Check it out. 21 minutes past the hour, and this is what happened. We carefully, over a period of, arguably well over 100 years. I mean, I believe the Jungle, this novel by Sinclair Lewis, was published back in the 19-aughts or the 19-teens, so more than 100 years ago. And it was about the meatpacking industry and just the horrors of, the filth and the disease and basically the poison that was making its way into our food supply, not to mention the brutality and violence of the meatpacking industry. And it led to the creation of the U.S., it was then called Pure Food and Drug Administration, what we now call the USDA and the FDA. And that was 115 years ago, more or less, in the neighborhood of 100 years ago. And we have built other agencies since then that are designed to protect we the people. The problem is that they're paid for with tax dollars, and the billionaires who own the Republican Party and own a small handful, but a meaningful handful of Democrats, don't want to pay their damn taxes. And their companies don't want to pay their damn taxes. I mean, keep in mind, when the top income tax rate on the morbidly rich was 90%, the period from the 1920s, from the early 1930s, right up until the basically the 1980s, when Reagan dropped, LBJ dropped it down to 74%, and then Reagan took it down to 25% for a year. But during that period of high taxation, that was the period of time when the American middle class grew faster than any middle class had ever grown in the history of the world, both as a percentage and in actual numbers. But now, we got to get rid of programs to pay for tax cuts for billionaires, and to pay for tax cuts for companies like Amazon and Microsoft and fill in the blanks. And that the billionaires own. And so what do? Well, Elon Musk, the richest guy in the world, comes in and he just starts, him and his little teenage, punks start just cutting programs left and right. And then Bob Kennedy comes in as the head of the Health and Human Services, the whole thing, and says, oh, we'll do the same thing, government efficiency, which is code for how we pay for tax breaks for billionaires. I mean, it's just that simple. And so what do we have going on right now? Well, there used to be this program it was a collaborative CDC program called FoodNet. And it monitored 8 different parasites or bugs that cause serious disease that can affect us. And among those 8 diseases was foodborne pathogens, is what they're called. One of them was cyclospora, which is a heat-loving parasite that has sickened over 1,000 people just in the state of Michigan now. It's in 28 other states. It produces what the FDA modestly refers to as explosive diarrhea. There was one guy saying that when he had it for an entire week, he was literally going to the toilet 40 times a day or more. And, which can lead to dehydration and can lead to death. We were also monitoring, the CDC was also monitoring through this FoodNet program, Campylobacter, which is a bacteria that sometimes infects meat and vegetables. Listeria, which can be a very, very dangerous food poisoning bug, Shigella, Vibrio, and Yersinia. Yersinia is the plague, right? And Vibrio is causes waterborne diarrheal problems that are just terrible. And so, in addition to cutting all these things, all this monitoring, now we've got this outbreak going on, and nobody knows where it's coming from because the CDC hasn't been monitoring this stuff for a year because of Elon Musk and Bob Kennedy. And they also fired the scientists who were managing the bird flu outbreak. They brought back a flesh-eating parasite that eats cattle. It was a program that cost us, a couple $1 million a year, and now we're losing $1 billion this year as a result of the screwworm coming back. They fired the guys at the FDA who review medical devices. They pulled research funding to protect pregnant women from domestic violence. That's, woke. 8 people in Florida this year have been infected with a flesh-eating bacteria that is now in our water that they used to monitor. This is what killed my niece. She had to have her leg amputated and then her arm amputated, and then it just killed her. And she was in the hospital with the best care you can get. 1 in 5 people infected with this bacteria die of it. It's called Vibrio vulnificus. And, all of this is happening, and even malaria is coming back because Bob Kennedy and Elon Musk decided that rich people shouldn't pay the damn taxes.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And to the best of my knowledge, not a single Democrat voted for the big, beautiful bill or any of this stuff that is destroying this. It's just remarkable. Subpoenas Times journalists and eyes fencing off Lafayette Square. Rubio governs Venezuela as a viceroy. Settlers detain Ro Khanna, and the CDC cuts unleash a parasite. Good morning. This is the Commonwealth Report, news for the public, not the powerful. You can follow us at commonwealthreport.news. Who's afraid of reporters doing their jobs? The Justice Department just sent federal agents to the homes of 4 New York Times reporters. Their crime? They wrote that the new Air Force One, a Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar, lacked the anti-missile defenses of the old plane, and that the Secret Service urged Trump to fly the older jet home from the NATO summit. Now those 4 journalists are ordered before a grand jury in Manhattan this week. The Times calls it a brazen act meant to intimidate. The subpoena came from Jay Clayton, the very prosecutor Trump just tasked to be our Director of National Intelligence. This follows cash settlements squeezed out of ABC and CBS and legal threats against the Post and the Journal. The Justice Department insists the reporters aren't the targets, only the people who leaked to them. When the government starts knocking on reporters' doors at night, the free press itself is on trial. Why is Trump fencing off the People's Park? Trump wants a permanent fence around Lafayette Square, the park right across from the White House, where Americans have gathered to protest since the early 1900s. Actually, the early 1800s. His plan lets officials slam the park shut whenever they decide there's a security risk. He also wants a brick walkway torn up because he's worried protesters might pick up bricks and throw them. Suffragettes marched there. War veterans demanded their bonuses there. It's federal land, and Trump is skipping the historical reviews the law requires, just like he did when he demolished the East Wing. One preservation leader calls the square the national symbolic heart of the public's right to speak. Wall off that square, and you wall off the First Amendment itself. Is Marco Rubio now the viceroy of Venezuela? The New York Times reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been quietly running Venezuela for months. Ever since the American military seized President Nicolas Maduro back in January and hauled him to the United States, Rubio has controlled Venezuela's finances, its oil revenue, and its day-to-day government. The Treasury collects the money from Venezuela's exports, then doles it back out under strict conditions that Rubio sets himself. Diplomats have started calling him the Viceroy, the old title for colonial governors. A former Human Rights Watch director says Trump has turned Venezuela into an effective American colony. One historian says we're back in the dollar diplomacy days of the 1910s, when Washington ran whole countries as banana republics. Rubio told the Senate there's no war and no occupation. We did this to Hawaii once. Now we're apparently doing it again. The rich got a handout. Working families got the bill. 1 year ago, Trump signed his One Big Beautiful Bill. Now the receipts are in. A new report finds the richest 1% will pocket $117 billion in tax cuts this year, an average windfall of about $66,000 each, more than the entire bottom 60% gets combined. To pay for it, Republicans cut over $1 trillion to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the biggest health care cuts in American history. Nearly 4 million people have already lost food assistance after a $187 billion cut to food stamps. Hospitals are closing. A Pennsylvania lawmaker and emergency doctor says, quote, he's never seen a more dangerous and purposeful attempt to make people sick and hungry. That's not a budget, that's a robbery. Machine guns detained Congressman Khanna in the West Bank. Congressman Khanna went to the occupied West Bank last week to see a Palestinian village that Israeli settlers had destroyed, the school and the homes flattened, its families driven out by settler raids 2 years ago. While he stood there, armed settlers rolled up carrying American-made M4 rifles, blocked the road, kicked his van, and detained him and other Americans. When Israeli soldiers arrived, Khanna says they sided with the settlers and kept the group held for over an hour until the American embassy stepped in. The Israeli military claims its soldiers dispersed the settlers and reopened the road. On national television Sunday, Khanna said flatly, quote, the IDF is lying. And he asked the obvious question, if they'll do all this to an United States congressman on camera, what are they doing to Palestinian families when nobody's looking every single day? Why can't anyone track the explosive diarrhea? And finally, a strange alert. A nasty parasite called cyclospora is sweeping the country right now, and it causes what doctors politely call explosive diarrhea. One Denver man said he, quote, wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy after 5 days of running through the bathroom over 40 times a day. More than 1,000 people are sick in Michigan alone, with cases in dozens of states. So why can't the government find the source? Well, because last year, Elon Musk's efficiency crusade and Robert Kennedy Jr. gutted the CDC program that tracked it. For 30 years, that program watched 8 foodborne germs. Now it watches only 2. The same cuts brought back a flesh-eating cattle parasite and fired the scientists watching the bird flu. They called it saving money. The country's paying for it now, one bathroom trip at a time. And that's the way it is today, Monday, July 13th, 2026. I'm Thom Hartmann. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. You know, other countries enjoy benefits like free health care in college, modern mass transit, affordable housing, food, and drugs. They also have inexpensive internet and phone service without companies listening and selling their information. Schools that don't need to mention school shooters. Streets and parks filled with pedestrians and children instead of tents and homeless people. We, on the other hand, have the world's largest collection of billionaires. Most Americans probably didn't realize this was the choice they were making back in the election of 1980 when Reagan and Bush promised morning in America. But here we are. We have been just basically sold out to the billionaires by all these years of Republican, economic. What do we do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do about it, and it starts with getting politically active. There's a great op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, America Chose Wealth Over Well-Being. Check it out. Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. So what's on your mind today? Frank in Laguna Hills, California. Hey, Frank, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I'm not eating my lunch this time. What I wanted to talk to you about was yesterday on YouTube, which I generally trust, there was a long speech by Rachel Maddox about how the FBI got warrants to go into Trump's New York City apartment and open a safe that was hidden in the floor, and they retrieved financial records for $850 million from other countries. And so I'm wondering if you have heard anything about that, because I went back on YouTube. No, and today they're supposed to be opening investigations into this because, you know, it's highly illegal, but yeah, and so I haven't been able to find anything.
I don't think there's a chance in hell that Kash Patel will let the FBI investigate Donald Trump. In fact, he's fired all the people who were involved in previous investigations of Trump.
Right,
all that institutional knowledge is gone.
But this seems so legitimate, and, you know, Rachel Maddox, I think she's a pretty stand-up person. And so, yeah, that was my question, if you have heard anything about it. Like I said, there's supposed to be investigations today, tomorrow, and Wednesday.
This is not Rachel Maddow of MS Now. This is Rachel Maddox of YouTube? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
okay,
that's a good question.
Yeah,
I thought it was Maddox.
Yeah. I don't know, Frank. I'm sorry. You've got an idea there that I'm unfamiliar. I'm sorry, but thank you. Mark in Long Beach, California. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Oh, good morning, Tom.
Hey.
It's your moderate Democratic friend, and I have a quick trivia question for you, and then I would just like to make two statements, so just give me 90 seconds. That's all I ask.
Go.
Here's a little trivia question for you. I have a feeling you're going to get it right. In Trump's 6 years as president, what Republican senator has opposed him more than any other? Would you like to take a guess? I don't
have any idea.
The answer is Susan Collins.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and in fact, if you look at her record, what you'll find is that every single time that she voted against Trump, it was already a foregone conclusion that that vote was going to lose. She has not taken any actual principled stands against Trump. She has not been the voice or the vote that was consequential in any way that would have stopped Trump. But on the other hand, she was the deciding vote for Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court.
Yes. And she did uphold Obama's, when Trump tried to get rid of Obamacare.
Right.
She did vote to keep that.
Yeah, but again, it was not any risk for her because she was not the only one.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of Lindsey Graham, but I will give him credit on two things. He really was one of the few Republican senators who wanted aid to go to Ukraine.
You're right.
And he did vote for Sotomayor and Eleni, if I'm pronouncing her name right, Elena Kagan.
Yeah.
He did vote for those two. He did oppose Merrick Garland, but he did vote for Kagan and Sotomayor. So, you know, he wasn't my favorite, but I don't think he was all that bad.
I think he was. But we'll leave it at that.
Would you like to see Kamala Harris run for president the third time in 2028? And I would like to respond just for
no, I would not, Mark.
Like
I'd rather. I think she, number one, she was a poor candidate before, and number two, where has she been for the last year? We need a fighter. We need somebody who's willing to take these guys on. So, Mark, thanks for the call. David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, what's up?
So, Russia and Iran are allies.
Correct.
Putin and Trump are allies. So I'm wondering, is this on-again, off-again, on-again war just a charade to deplete the American military for the advantage of Putin?
And Xi, if he wants to take Taiwan.
There you go.
I think it's entirely possible. I've said it on this program multiple times that when Lindsey Graham and Benjamin Netanyahu were trying to talk Trump into bombing the crap out of Iran, that and Trump was talking to Putin every 2 weeks, as he does every 2 weeks. It seems he has one of these two-hour phone conversations with Putin. And Putin's got very good English, and he's a very smart man, and his specialty when he ran East Germany was, psychologically manipulating people. I've been saying all along that there was no doubt in my mind that Putin said, "Oh yeah, you could take Iran, no problem. Look at what you did in Venezuela. That worked out well for you. You should try Iran too." I mean, I have no evidence of that, but I'd be astonished if Putin had tried to discourage Trump from attacking Iran, even though Iran is Putin's ally.
It just seems too coincidental. And one more thing. You always say it always started with Reagan. I've told you before, I believe it all started with Nixon. I think we're both wrong. I think it all started with McCarthy and Roy Cohn, who mentored Nixon and also mentored Trump.
You're right. Yeah. There's a lot of different starting points. You could argue that much of it started with Woodrow Wilson even. But the first guy to have real power to put the Powell Memo into effect and the mandate for leadership that the Heritage Foundation came out with in 1981 for the Reagan administration was Reagan. Nixon, kind of bumbled around. He did some things that were good. He did some things that weren't. He was mostly just a crook, and trying to manage inflation and the oil crisis and all that. We got the EP. He signed the EPA into law after opposing it vigorously. But Reagan actually had the power to do things and did it. Yeah.
One more thing about Israel. There's an old saying. On the spirit of never again, the victim becomes the victimizer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've often thought of that, and and it's interesting. The Germans in the 1930s felt that they were the victims of the rest of Europe from the 1920s and from World War I. Because Germany was destroyed and then was hit by the Treaty of Versailles with these huge payments that they had to make to the other countries, which is why they devalued their currency, because the payments were specified in Deutschmarks, and so they just, ruined the value of the Deutschmark, and that, destroyed. So you had, Germans feeling like victims, and so they went looking for victims, the Jews and the communists. And, I think to some extent, I think that kind of dynamic, a psychological dynamic, is playing out in Israel as well. David, thank you for the call. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to, Tom's call and say, I don't see how in heck, we've moved too far to the left at all in this country. And in fact, the whole of nations, other people, rest like Robert Reich, Wolf, et cetera, we have moved so far to the right in my lifetime that you would have to be blind not to see what has happened and the redistribution.
Take Tom's comments with a grain of salt. He voted for Donald Trump, which has to cause you to question his judgment right from the get-go.
Well, see, that I didn't know, but I'm really tired of people, trying to move the party or the Democratic Party back to the neoliberal middle. There's no middle, as I can't remember. He said there's no middle. The only thing that's in the middle are dead armadillos
and a yellow stripe.
Yellow line.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
that's
the
Jim
thing
Hightower
is,
saying. Yeah. He wrote a book with that title.
Yeah, and so they should teach economic history, but since the beginning of capitalism, there's been a concentration, or the cyclical nature of capitalism makes necessary for things like the New Deal, which redistributed wealth to a middle class.
And I think we're there again, John. And I think that we're set for a major redistribution. Well, this is why Bernie and others are talking about this annual 5% tax on billionaires' wealth. John, thank you for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back, Alan in Seattle. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Another beautiful day in the Pacific Northwest.
Indeed. It really is, actually.
Yeah. Following up on the previous caller's environmental thing, just listening. Okay, we've got about 145 dead gray whales washing up on the West Coast. Who knows how many of the whales that died are on the bottom of the ocean. We've got derechos, wildfires, heat domes, massive water dumps. I think New Orleans got like 6 to 8 inches of rain in 1 hour.
Wow.
The environmental catastrophe is the elephant in the room, and it's all about oil.
Yeah.
Why are we funding fossil fuels to the detriment of the American people?
Well, because they gave Donald Trump several $100 million. Yesterday, Louise was telling me that she'd been looking into this, that the gray whales are what's called a sentinel species, a species that is so embedded in and lives as a result of the food chain and the environmental circumstances that create that food chain, that their disappearance is a sign of a much broader extinction, a much broader disappearance, a much broader destruction, and much larger consequences than we realize. And I think that's where we're at. This is, and you're right. This is because ExxonMobil in the 1970s knew that this was going to happen, and they just decided to put a couple $100 million into funding, these phony baloney researchers to tell us that climate change ain't real.
Well, I think if we can get back into governing and take over the Senate and the House and the White House, we should slowly or quickly remove all the gimmies and benefits and tax loopholes that the oil industry has and redirect those funds to the rebuilding of people who have lost their homes to fire, to drought, to floods, and have them pay for the insurance, because their actions are the ones that are causing this destruction.
I'm with you, but right now Trump is withholding FEMA funds from 7, I believe, now blue states, cumulatively over the last year. And he just said no to 4 or 5 of them last week. I reported on that in this program. And, and they're taking that money and using it to pay for, tax cuts for billionaires. I mean, it's just, that's all they care about.
Oh, no. Pond scum removal. Pond scum removal.
Oh, well, yeah. That's, because of the vandals, those Antifa vandals.
Does that vandal drive around in a huge 20-ton limo?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Have a good day, Tom. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alan. Good talking to you. This is a real. I keep wanting to write an article about this, or go off on a rant about this. That when are we going to hold these fossil fuel executives to account? I realize that the ones who made the initial decision to lie to us are all probably dead now, but some of them are probably still around. Lee Raymond, when he was head of ExxonMobil, they had a nickname for him, Fat Bastard. Per the Mike Myers movie. It's like, when are we going to hold these guys to account? What's it going to take? They're literally killing us, and they're making billions doing it. It's 49 minutes past the hour. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Recently, I did an op-ed and a little rant here about what happens when you raise the top income tax rate on morbidly rich people to 90%, and how, that helps reduce income inequality and funds the government, all kinds of good positive things. What about corporate taxes? We really need to go back to the 50% top corporate income tax rate that we had under Dwight Eisenhower, for example. The reason why is not on the assumption that we're going to collect all that money, But what it does is it causes corporations to change their behavior, to do things to try to get tax deductions so they don't have to pay that in taxes. And what are the main things they do? They develop new products. They do research and development. They become more competitive. They open up new stores. They pay their employees better. They offer better benefits. All of these things are 100% tax deductible and thus lower their corporate income taxes and help out America. You can read all about it over at HartmannReport.com.
We worked the overtime, we paid our
Minutes
dues.
past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Charles in Portland. Hey, Charles, what's up?
Good morning, Tom, from a beautiful day in Portland. How are you?
Yeah, it's just a marvelous morning. Yeah, I'm great. How are you, Charles?
Well, I'm doing great. I called to say something depressing about the K-shaped economy, how it's just going to get worse under the oligarchs. But
oh yeah, it is.
But now I've listened to a whole bunch of wonderful callers talk about a bunch of wonderful things, and I'm worried about the Democrats because come up this election and everything, they've got to offer something coherent. Mm-hmm. They've got to offer something for people to actually take part in to change the oligarchy. And I think they're floundering around looking for a message. The reason that Plantner, that Bernie, that all these people are resonating is because we want a change to this. And unless they can actually say, here's how we're going to do it, they could offer a menu of things to restrain the president. They wussed out under Nixon and everything, and they never actually pursued the thing. So we need like a clean Nuremberg level, say, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where you come and admit the crimes you did and you can't be prosecuted, but we're going to prosecute some crimes for a year and then stop, so that it, you
South
can.
Africa did, and it worked.
Yeah, but I mean, because the right wing is going to come and say they're weaponizing government against these people, and it's like, no, we're enforcing justice. You committed crimes. Yeah. You need to be prosecuted, but you can't appear to be weaponizing it. But if you lay out something for everybody to get on board with,
I get all that, Charles, and I agree. I completely agree with you. In terms of revenge or making things right or restoring democracy, those are all things that probably there's a fairly broad consensus among Democrats for. The problem is when you get into the things like free college, free health care, eliminating student debt, raising taxes on rich people. Those are things that the vast majority, I'm talking over 80% of all Americans are in favor of, depending on how you phrase the question and exactly what the program is. But broadly speaking, most Americans want. But there's there's a large cohort of Democrats, the kind of the Jared Golden and Josh Gottheimers of the world, the guys who are taking big money from big corporations and from right-wing billionaires and from AIPAC. And they just don't want those things to happen because their patrons don't want them to happen. And as long as we've got this system that the Supreme Court, the 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court have imposed on us, where the wealthy not only can buy people by buying campaigns, but they can even buy individual pieces of legislation from judges and from mayors and governors.
Alec.
Well, it's not just Alec. It's the Snyder decision, from 3 years ago, where they said that if I go to a politician and I say, gee, wouldn't it be nice if you wrote a piece of legislation that got my company a $100 million contract tomorrow morning, and he does it, and then I say, oh, thank you so much. Here's $100,000 in gold coins. That if I give that to him after...
Didn't the Supreme Court just recently authorize coordination between campaign committees and dark money?
Yes, and they also said that the Democratic parties can act as intermediaries for dark money, so you'll never know who's actually funneling it. But now, if you pay a politician or a judge after the decision or after the action is taken, it's no longer a bribe, it's a tip. It's a gratuity was the word that they used.
Oh my God.
And no, seriously, look it up. And I mean, it was like a 2-day story when it came down. We've got to change that stuff.
Just like the Epstein files.
Yeah, and the problem is that you've got about half the Democratic Party, the half who are bound to the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who are saying no to that and yes to all the stuff that frankly we all want, to a new Deal. But then you've got the other half of the Democratic Party that are still deeply enmeshed in foreign money and domestic, money and corporate money, and who are
fight.
Yeah, and that's going to be the fight. And that's where the progressives among us, which is you and me and most of the people who listen to this program, need to be standing up and speaking out, and we need to be taking a position. So anyhow, I got to run. Thanks, Charles. Sophie in Los Angeles. Hey, Sophie, we've got about a minute left here in this hour. What's up?
Thank you very much for taking my call. I'm calling requesting potential guidance regarding my father, a veteran who went missing in 2017. We're approaching year 11, and I wondered what you might suggest as being a way forward when hearing after hearing seems to get stalled, or actually gets stalled in court, where delays are being forgiven without the judge dismissing.
Do you have any suspicion as to why or where he went missing?
Yeah, there is a report of foul play. There's a remote, reportedly a remote relative who was involved, who
Sophie, I'm sorry. I'll take your word for it. It was terrible. I don't know enough about your situation. I'm not an attorney. I can't advise you anyway. But I would, hook up with local law enforcement and any of your local politicians that you can there in LA. Maybe somebody on your city council. But good luck, Sophie. Sophie, I wish you the best. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Subpoenas times journalists and eyes fencing off Lafayette Square. Rubio governs Venezuela as a viceroy. Settlers detain Khanna, and the CDC cuts unleash a parasite. Good morning. This is the Commonwealth Report, news for the public, not the powerful. You can follow us at commonwealthreport.news. Who's afraid of reporters doing their jobs? The Justice Department just sent federal agents to the homes of 4 New York Times reporters. Their crime? They wrote that the new Air Force One, a Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar, lacked the anti-missile defenses of the old plane, and that the Secret Service urged Trump to fly the older jet home from the NATO summit. Now those 4 journalists are ordered before a grand jury in Manhattan this week. The Times calls it a brazen act meant to intimidate. The subpoena came from Jay Clayton, the very prosecutor Trump just tasked to be our Director of National Intelligence. This follows cash settlements squeezed out of ABC and CBS and legal threats against the Post and the Journal. The Justice Department insists the reporters aren't the targets, only the people who leaked to them. When the government starts knocking on reporters' doors at night, the free press itself is on trial. Why is Trump fencing off the People's Park? Trump wants a permanent fence around Lafayette Square, the park right across from the White House, where Americans have gathered to protest since the early 1900s. Actually, the early 1800s. His plan lets officials slam the park shut whenever they decide there's a security risk. He also wants a brick walkway torn up because he's worried protesters might pick up bricks and throw them. Suffragettes marched there. War veterans demanded their bonuses there. It's federal land, and Trump is skipping the historical reviews the law requires, just like he did when he demolished the East Wing. One preservation leader calls the square the national symbolic heart of the public's right to speak. Wall off that square, and you wall off the First Amendment itself. Is Marco Rubio now the Viceroy of Venezuela? The New York Times reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been quietly running Venezuela for months. Ever since the American military seized President Nicolas Maduro back in January and hauled him to the United States, Rubio has controlled Venezuela's finances, its oil revenue, and its day-to-day government. The Treasury collects the money from Venezuela's exports, then doles it back out under strict conditions that Rubio sets himself. Diplomats have started calling him the Viceroy, the old title for colonial governors. A former Human Rights Watch director says Trump has turned Venezuela into an effective American colony. One historian says we're back in the dollar diplomacy days of the 1910s, when Washington ran whole countries as banana republics. Rubio told the Senate there's no war and no occupation. We did this to Hawaii once. Now we're apparently doing it again. The rich got a handout. Working families got the bill. 1 year ago, Trump signed his One Big Beautiful Bill. Now the receipts are in. A new report finds the richest 1% will pocket $117 billion in tax cuts this year, an average windfall of about $66,000 each, more than the entire bottom 60% gets combined. To pay for it, Republicans cut over $1 trillion to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the biggest health care cuts in American history. Nearly 4 million people have already lost food assistance after a $187 billion cut to food stamps. Hospitals are closing. A Pennsylvania lawmaker and emergency doctor says, quote, he's never seen a more dangerous and purposeful attempt to make people sick and hungry. That's not a budget, that's a robbery. Machine guns detained Congressman Khanna in the West Bank. Congressman Khanna went to the occupied West Bank last week to see a Palestinian village that Israeli settlers had destroyed, the school and the homes flattened, its families driven out by settler raids 2 years ago. While he stood there, armed settlers rolled up carrying American-made M4 rifles, blocked the road, kicked his van, and detained him and other Americans. When Israeli soldiers arrived, Khanna says they sided with the settlers and kept the group held for over an hour until the American embassy stepped in. The Israeli military claims its soldiers dispersed the settlers and reopened the road. On national television Sunday, Khanna said flatly, quote, the IDF is lying. And he asked the obvious question, if they'll do all this to an United States congressman on camera, what are they doing to Palestinian families when nobody's looking every single day? Why can't anyone track the explosive diarrhea? And finally, a strange alert. A nasty parasite called cyclospora is sweeping the country right now, and it causes what doctors politely call explosive diarrhea. One Denver man said he, quote, wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy after 5 days of running through the bathroom over 40 times a day. More than 1,000 people are sick in Michigan alone, with cases in dozens of states. So why can't the government find the source? Well, because last year, Elon Musk's efficiency crusade and Robert Kennedy Jr. gutted the CDC program that tracked it. For 30 years, that program watched 8 foodborne germs. Now it watches only 2. The same cuts brought back a flesh-eating cattle parasite and fired the scientists watching the bird flu. They called it saving money. The country's paying for it now, one bathroom trip at a time. And that's the way it is today, Monday, July 13th, 2026. I'm Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to the third hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Sabrina Hake, the federal trial attorney, 20-plus years experience, specializing in First and 14th Amendment defense, contributor to numerous law journals and publications, including the Chicago Tribune. Sabrina Hake, HAAKE.substack.com, is the website for the Hake Take, which is her newsletter. And Sabrina, welcome back to the program. Your piece on court reform, it's literally titled "Court Reform Just Became a Matter of Survival," I thought was seminal. It just absolutely, this has to be at the center of any kind of a small d or big D Democratic agenda. Can you tell us about it?
Sure, I totally agree. It has now moved to the very top of the agenda of any kind of reform, from Citizens United to climate change, everything we need to address. We have to start. All of those things get bumped now with court reform, and here's why. I mean, we've been coming to this pinnacle for a couple of years now. The court has expanded the executive authority under the most corrupt administration our country has ever seen. And it's bad timing, but it's worse than that. It's intentional. If you look at the two decisions that I just wrote about and compared them side by side, one is the Slaughter ruling, one is the Cook ruling, and they're completely contradictory. In Slaughter, the Supreme Court, the Republican majority, 6-3 ruling, said that Trump can fire any commissioner, director, commissioner, boards, etc., that govern the federal agencies. And though that governance has been non-political, nonpartisan, and protected as independent decisions for almost 100 years. They completely reversed Humphrey's executor, under which the Congress had created quasi-independence for federal agencies, because judges don't have all the answers. The president doesn't have all the answers. Congress recognized that, and when they passed certain laws, like the Environmental Protection Act, they put in certain protections for the independence of those decisions. Now, the EPA director has always been appointed by the president. We've already seen that they're going to completely obliterate a lot of what the EPA stands for. But under Slaughter, he can now go in and fire all the advisory boards. And these have direct implications for human health and survival. One is the Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board, the Science Advisory Board, Clean Air Advisory Board, Board of Scientific Counselors. Any person who rules against one of Trump's donors or makes comments that would hurt Trump's donors, primarily the fossil fuel industry, but of course Monsanto, all the chemical releases, all the toxic pollution that is coming out of his donors, they will now be circumspect in what they say to criticize those acts of pollution, and they will certainly be reluctant to enforce policies that run against these donors' commercial interests. The reason it's so appalling to me, that decision is the wrong decision without question in so many ways, and 15 minutes isn't enough time to go into why it's unconstitutional. But in general, Congress created these independent agencies with quasi-independent functions, recognizing the courts and the Congress's own inherent limitations in making scientific rulings. They're not engineers, they're not chemists, they're not weather predictors, they don't have the expertise to make these decisions. So they vested these executive agencies with that authority and made them bipartisan, non-political, and protected for a certain amount of time. The reason it's so shocking in this particular ruling is because the same day the Supreme Court came out with a completely contradictory ruling in Cook. So in Slaughter, they said that Trump can fire any commissioner, any director of any federal agency for no reason whatsoever. Which will now, of course, open that up to corruption, self-dealing, retribution, revenge, everything that Trump stands for. But then in that same afternoon, they came out with the Cook ruling that said just the opposite. In the Cook ruling, the court said that Trump cannot fire a Fed governor because there were certain trappings of independence that Congress intended when they created the Federal Reserve Board. This, of course, could be said about any federal agency that they just gutted under Slaughter. Right. But the reason this is so shocking to me, I just want to read what Roberts wrote the decisions, and he wrote a clause that tells you that the Supreme Court knew exactly what they were doing to the federal agencies that they were gutting in Slaughter with this rationale that they applied to Cook. And here's what Roberts said. He said, in Cook, you have to protect federal governors with only for-cause removal because, quote, without such constraints in place, any perceived or alleged misstep could provide a ready pretext for a governor's removal, a fact that he would surely know and that would surely weigh on him as he decided what to say and how to vote. Nothing could be more corrosive of the independence that Congress sought to preserve. Roberts wrote this explaining why you can't fire a Fed governor,
right.
Because
it could have been the dissent in Slaughter.
Exactly. I mean, but it's the rationale. It's the rationale that shows that the 6 Republicans on the court knew exactly what they were doing in Slaughter.
Yeah.
That corrosive language that says it's going to wipe out the independence and corrode all of the actions of the Fed apply to every federal agency that they just did that.
And the first one Trump went after was the one
Elections.
that is, it was designed to make our elections work smoothly, which he does not want to have happen.
Which is chilling, but it also tells you what he can do to every agency that Congress created. And Congress vested those agencies with quasi-independence so that they could do their job. SCOTUS now eviscerated that power, basically saying they're going to make the decisions. The executive is going to have complete power over who can serve and what, which also has First Amendment implications that the court didn't get into, but that's another topic. But they know what they're doing because in Slaughter and Cook the same day, they said just the opposite. They said you can't corrode the independence or the people are going to politicize their own opinions and rulings. And that's exactly what happened. So court reform has now become a matter of survival. I'm a bit worried, Tom, that it's a bit too dry. I don't know if candidates can run on it successfully. I mean, if J6 wasn't enough to get 91 million people to the polls, 91 million people after they saw J6 didn't even bother to vote. So how are you going to go from something that salacious and that in your face and that obvious for 91 million people who didn't vote for that? How are you going to get them to get upset about court reform? How do you make this very esoteric topic, which is a matter of their lives and life and death, how do you make them understand that? In the election of 1980, actually, arguably in the election of 68 and 72, court reform was a huge issue. I mean, largely because of the Brown versus Board decision. And you had Fred Koch, who was paying for billboards for the John Birch Society that were all over America. There was one just down the road from our home in Lansing, Michigan, that said impeach Earl Warren. This issue of fixing the court was a major motivator for the Republican base throughout the 70s, the 80s, well, the 60s certainly, the 70s and the 80s. But although, Nixon had, with his appointment, I believe it was his appointment of Powell that flipped the court to the right. Am I remembering correct? That sounds right. Yeah.
In 72. So, that kind of took a lot of steam out of it. But the Republic, I lived through that. My dad was a Republican activist. My brother was a Republican consultant for Republican politicians in Michigan, just on the state level. And it's just a matter of the party itself and the wise elders in the party making a hell of a lot of noise about it. And I don't understand. I can get where a national health care program or free college, where you've got health insurance billionaires and corporations that are pouring money down the throats of Democratic as well as Republican politicians or the banks, with regard to education. I get how those can become, quote, controversial within the Democratic Party. I don't understand how court reform becomes controversial inside the Democratic Party. What am I missing?
I don't think it's controversial. There is some worry that whatever you try to do, Republicans will push back the next time they're in office.
Sure.
But I want to say a little bit about specific court reform.
Okay.
Alito and Roberts, to a certain extent, this court has already said nobody can regulate us. Nobody can impose ethics rules on us. If Congress just sticks to ethics reforms, which everyone should probably agree with, this iteration of this court will overrule anything that they pass.
Sure.
They will say nobody can regulate us. So Congress needs to go past that and get straight to the jurisdiction issue under the exceptions clause. So first of all, they need to
Article 3, Section 2.
Yeah, and the exceptions clause says Congress Congress, not the court. Congress decides what appellate court jurisdiction the Supreme Court has. They have original jurisdiction over certain things that make sense, like beefs between two states. They have original jurisdiction that's limited and spelled out. But when it comes to appellate jurisdiction, which is what they're doing, which is what the Slaughter case, the Cook case, anything that they review is an appellate decision. Congress can go in and completely restrict the Supreme Court's ability to act in those cases. I would suggest that Congress take away the Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction over any case that turns on scientific expertise.
Yeah.
And of course, this will affect climate, this will affect fossil fuels, this will affect anything that regulates Americans' health and survival, because this court is elevating corporate interests over human interests. I mean, the whole reason they accepted the Cook decision saying that Trump can't fire without cause is because they're protecting the stock market. They're protecting money. They're protecting the bond market. Everything they did in Cook is to protect the financial system. But in Slaughter, they're ruling that Trump can basically.
That's just protecting people. Now, I discovered this when I was writing my book on the Supreme Court, that just during the 8 years of the Reagan presidency, Republicans introduced more than 100 pieces of legislation that included a court stripping paragraph, a paragraph saying the Supreme Court may not rule on this issue.
Interesting.
None of them, to the best of my knowledge, became law. And there have been a half a dozen or a dozen maybe that have become laws since then that contain a court stripping provision, but they're largely non-controversial. I devoted a large chunk of the book to this issue. I agree with you. Congress needs to take back the power that Article 3, Section 2 gives them.
Right. Can I just say one other thing, though? On the partisan, you brought up the Republican difference. With the court reform under Reagan and in the past 50 years, the Republicans get behind that because their reason for court reform is to protect corporate interests. Mm-hmm. They have big money to protect corporate interests, and this court is given the ability to carte blanche fund all of the federal elections going forward. It's an uneven fight because Democrats don't have the same war chest. There are individual races that are different, but Republicans have $80 million more than Democrats, and Republicans will go to bat to reform the court to protect corporate interests. They're all about money. The little guy doesn't have that money.
Yeah. And the Republicans have 250 plus billionaire families supporting them. Right. There are three that support the Democrats. So the great Sabrina Hake, you've got to read her newsletter. Subscribe to it. It's called The Hake Take, Haake. You can find it over on Substack, easy to track down, or just go to sabrinahake.substack.com. Sabrina, thank you so much.
Thank you for everything you do.
Back at you. It's always great talking with you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Dusty, in Catsup County, Washington. Hey, Dusty, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm calling because there was talk about alternative fuels and getting away from petroleum earlier in the show. And I did that. My family did that. We, when the Northwest decided it was going to have some manufacture of biofuels, and the programs were coming alive, it was becoming available, we went shopping for a diesel car that would take the biofuel without much difficulty, and we got like a 12-year-old Mercedes-Benz at a really good price, and we put biodiesel straight in there. And the day that we did that, I sat in the driver's seat and I realized that I had blocked my senses from the petroleum that was always in a car, always in the seating area where the people ride. It was gone, and we most people. I was made environmentally ill, and I'm a highly sensitive person now, so I can I do sense things that other people don't. However, I think that most people would realize that they are no longer riding around on a gigantic bomb bladder of petroleum underneath them.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, it's the same. It's the same with an electric car. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have a garage, and having an electric car, the garage no longer smells like gas fumes. I mean, it's just amazing.
Bingo. That's bingo.
Yeah.
It is amazing. And that amount of that toxic material is enough to cause cancer. So if we could get away from it, we might eliminate per whole percentage points, maybe even 5 or 10%, or we would live longer, healthier lives.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Dusty. The studies show literally thousands of people are dying of cancer. You know, every day, every week in America, certainly, you know, with great frequency, as the result of having inhaled particles and gases that come out of tailpipes, and of course other fossil fuel sources. But you know, the number one and number two, and I don't recall which one is which. Sources of environmental pollution by fossil fuels are housing and transportation. And we can fix both of those. I mean, you know, in Norway, for God's sake, you know, I mean, up under the Arctic Circle, you've got houses that you can literally heat with a hairdryer because they're just so efficient. You know, I've seen them. And when we used to live in Vermont, I mean, you know, we paid a lot of attention to that kind of stuff. We were living up in the mountains, you know. And transportation, of course, you know, about roughly 25% of all the new cars being sold in Europe now are electric. In some countries, it's way high. You know, in Norway, it's almost 100%. Here in the United States, it's only 6%. I mean, we've got a lot of work to do.
Isn't it crazy that we've just cut back on the solar stuff?
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. I mean, yesterday I plugged my car in, the sun was shining, and I fully charged my car, and it didn't cost me a penny. It all came right from the sun to my roof to my car. And I mean, holy cow. We should all be able to do this. This is what Germany did for their citizens. Why can't America do it for ours? Dusty, thank you. We'll be right back. Tired of news that protects the powerful? Get reporting with a backbone at the Commonwealth Report. News for the public, not the powerful. Twice daily, visit commonwealthreport.news and subscribe today, because democracy belongs to all of us. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. You know, they wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, you know, their ultimate talking document, does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, you know, they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the 1st, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out. Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour, and the results are in. We know now the consequences of the first full year of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This piece of legislation that passed Congress, the House and the Senate without a single Democratic vote. Several organizations, Defend America Action, the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, have done deep dives into the consequences of this. And this is an analysis from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. The richest 1% of Americans this year will see $117 billion in tax cuts. Let that sink in for a minute. $117 billion in tax cuts for the top 1%. And, you know, that's more than the entire bottom 60% got. I mean, it's It's nuts. At the same time, the law contained the largest cuts to federal health care funding in U.S. history. It slashed over $1 trillion from Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act to pay for $1 trillion in tax cuts for the billionaires, $117 billion of which they'll get this year. They also found that enrollment in Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, had fallen by 3.8 million because the One Big Beautiful Bill made it much harder for people to qualify for these programs. And you have to jump through a lot of hoops, and you've got to renew over and over and over. And the ACA marketplace subsidies, the Affordable Care Act, the insurance premiums are increasing 114% on average, leading 1 out of 5 people on this program, that's 4.2 million people, to drop their coverage entirely. Additionally, 11 million low-income Americans who were getting health care through the Affordable Care Act and not paying for it, they were getting it for free. Those $0 programs, those are gone. Thank you, Republicans, with your One Big Beautiful Bill. And deductibles rose an average of 37% for those people who buy insurance on their own. In total, more than 8 million people are estimated to have lost insurance coverage due to cuts in these programs. And that's just this year. That's just, we're 6 months into it. I mean, we're 1 year into the Big Beautiful Bill Act. But, we're seeing these dramatic changes this year. So it's, if you are represented by a Republican and there's anything you can do to work for the Democrat who's challenging them, it's becoming like a matter, as Sabrina Hicks said, a matter of survival.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So what say you? I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Subpoenas times journalists and eyes fencing off Lafayette Square. Rubio governs Venezuela as a viceroy. Settlers detain Ro Khanna, and the CDC cuts unleash a parasite. Good morning. This is the Commonwealth Report, news for the public, not the powerful. You can follow us at commonwealthreport.news. Who's afraid of reporters doing their jobs? The Justice Department just sent federal agents to the homes of 4 New York Times reporters. Their crime? They wrote that the new Air Force One, a Boeing 747 gifted by Qatar, lacked the anti-missile defenses of the old plane, and that the Secret Service urged Trump to fly the older jet home from the NATO summit. Now those 4 journalists are ordered before a grand jury in Manhattan this week. The Times calls it a brazen act meant to intimidate. The subpoena came from Jay Clayton, the very prosecutor Trump just tasked to be our Director of National Intelligence. This follows cash settlements squeezed out of ABC and CBS and legal threats against the Post and the Journal. The Justice Department insists the reporters aren't the targets, only the people who leaked to them. When the government starts knocking on reporters' doors at night, the free press itself is on trial. Why is Trump fencing off the People's Park? Trump wants a permanent fence around Lafayette Square, the park right across from the White House, where Americans have gathered to protest since the early 1900s. Actually, the early 1800s. His plan lets officials slam the park shut whenever they decide there's a security risk. He also wants a brick walkway torn up because he's worried protesters might pick up bricks and throw them. Suffragettes marched there. War veterans demanded their bonuses there. It's federal land, and Trump is skipping the historical reviews the law requires, just like he did when he demolished the East Wing. One preservation leader calls the square the national symbolic heart of the public's right to speak. Wall off that square, and you wall off the First Amendment itself. Is Marco Rubio now the viceroy of Venezuela? The New York Times reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been quietly running Venezuela for months. Ever since the American military seized President Nicolas Maduro back in January and hauled him to the United States, Rubio has controlled Venezuela's finances, its oil revenue, and its day-to-day government. The Treasury collects the money from Venezuela's exports, then doles it back out under strict conditions that Rubio sets himself. Diplomats have started calling him the Viceroy, the old title for colonial governors. A former Human Rights Watch director says Trump has turned Venezuela into an effective American colony. One historian says we're back in the dollar diplomacy days of the 1910s, when Washington ran whole countries as banana republics. Rubio told the Senate there's no war and no occupation. We did this to Hawaii once. Now we're apparently doing it again. The rich got a handout. Working families got the bill. 1 year ago, Trump signed his One Big Beautiful Bill. Now the receipts are in. A new report finds the richest 1% will pocket $117 billion in tax cuts this year, an average windfall of about $66,000 each, more than the entire bottom 60% gets combined. To pay for it, Republicans cut over $1 trillion to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the biggest health care cuts in American history. Nearly 4 million people have already lost food assistance after a $187 billion cut to food stamps. Hospitals are closing. A Pennsylvania lawmaker and emergency doctor says, quote, he's never seen a more dangerous and purposeful attempt to make people sick and hungry. That's not a budget, that's a robbery. Machine guns detained Congressman Khanna in the West Bank. Congressman Khanna went to the occupied West Bank last week to see a Palestinian village that Israeli settlers had destroyed, the school and the homes flattened, its families driven out by settler raids 2 years ago. While he stood there, armed settlers rolled up carrying American-made M4 rifles, blocked the road, kicked his van, and detained him and other Americans. When Israeli soldiers arrived, Khanna says they sided with the settlers and kept the group held for over an hour until the American embassy stepped in. The Israeli military claims its soldiers dispersed the settlers and reopened the road. On national television Sunday, Khanna said flatly, quote, the IDF is lying. And he asked the obvious question, if they'll do all this to an United States congressman on camera, what are they doing to Palestinian families when nobody's looking every single day? Why can't anyone track the explosive diarrhea? And finally, a strange alert. A nasty parasite called cyclospora is sweeping the country right now, and it causes what doctors politely call explosive diarrhea. One Denver man said he, quote, wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy after 5 days of running through the bathroom over 40 times a day. More than 1,000 people are sick in Michigan alone, with cases in dozens of states. So why can't the government find the source? Well, because last year, Elon Musk's efficiency crusade and Robert Kennedy Jr. gutted the CDC program that tracked it. For 30 years, that program watched 8 foodborne germs. Now it watches only 2. The same cuts brought back a flesh-eating cattle parasite and fired the scientists watching the bird flu. They called it saving money. The country's paying for it now, one bathroom trip at a time. And that's the way it is today, Monday, July 13th, 2026. I'm Thom Hartmann. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Did you know that the ancient Roman Republic, which for 480 years was actually a democratic republic before Julius Caesar kind of ended the democracy phase and replaced it with the autocracy phase, that they were brought down by a very small group of very rich people. The richest man in ancient Rome was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the richest guy, the billionaire of Rome. And he frankly hated the Roman free bread for all welfare system. It was being paid for with his tax dollars, after all. So him and Pompey the Great and a few other rich guys got together, and they basically crashed Rome. They turned it into an oligarchy and then into a tyranny. And the parallels to what Trump is doing right now are absolutely shocking. There's an article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled American Caesar, Trump's Path to Power Mirrors Rome's Darkest Days. Check it out. Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. So what's on your mind today? Let's pick up some calls here. Byron in Banning, California. Hey, Byron, what's up?
You, man. Let me ask you a question. Sometimes I listen to a show that comes on, and some African-American callers will call up We want retribution. We want reparation. We want reparation. We want reparation. And they get little feedback, negative, but not much. I would like to hear your feelings about reparation for black people.
I think that people whose ancestors were slaves have a legitimate claim. I also think that Native Americans who had their land stolen from them and their ancestors slaughtered have a legitimate claim. The question is, how do you fulfill that? You know, it's like, you know, after World War II, the families of the Jews who were slaughtered in Germany had a legitimate claim, and Germany paid billions in reparations to Israel and to individual families for years. In fact, I think they still are. They figured out how to do it. They got together and came up with a national consensus. But the problem, or not the problem, but the reality is that there was a widespread understanding across Germany after World War II that they had done something horrible. And in the mind of about half of all white Americans, which is the majority of the Republican voters, all of that was just fine. You know, the slaves were just happy, and the slave owners were the ones who got screwed. And, you know, so the step one is to create that national consensus. And I think we were close to that, frankly, during the Obama administration. And we were having those conversations. And then, of course, Trump came into power and this is, I think this is a large part of the whole DEI thing and whitewashing all of our history, is to prevent those conversations from happening again, because they may lead to something like reparations.
Let me ask you the one, and then I'll let you go. Where do you think it would be on the race relations in America if only blacks at this time receive reparation, not the Indians, not the Chinese, and anybody else? What would you think would be the race relation outcome in the United States?
I suspect it would probably make things worse, at least over the short term, in large part, and not just for the obvious reason that some people are going to feel left out, but because the Republicans, or I shouldn't say Republicans, I should say the racists who largely run the Republican Party and certainly determine strategy for the Republican Party, would use this as a wedge to split us apart, to get white people hating on black people and jealous, and this is predictable, Byron. This is not rocket science.
Yeah. All right, Tom, I just wanted to hear another opinion on it, and I appreciate it, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, John. Or Byron, excuse me. Good talking to you. Thank you. John in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, my brother?
I'm here.
Hey, how you doing? And I was just listening to that young man with that call. Hey, I'm a black veteran.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we deserve what you said. We deserve that. This country been screwing us for years, and they've been screwing over us year after year. Our history hasn't been told in this country. They come up and they nickel pick certain things to tell these people. We should have our history out there in front right now. I'm tired of Hollywood. They never got it right. They need to get it right.
Yeah.
Another thing, we need to go after Fox News and take them bastards down, because I'm tired of them people spreading all that propaganda that they spread, and they didn't do that in Australia, but they got the Reagan administration let them come in here and destroy this country. We need to be after them guys too. I want some people to stand up. The white people need to open their mouths and tell them about the racism that's been going on in this country for years or decades. Because that's the only thing that the Republican runs on. They don't have any policy.
Yeah.
They don't do anything for anybody. But they do what they can do this. They can tell you lies and everything, and doggone split us up and point at the black people.
Yeah, they've
deserve reparations.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. The GOP has no program at all for average people. And that's why we got Willie Horton back in the 90s. That's why, we got Kamala Harris, being put on TV talking about trans people, in the 2024 election. If they're not going after black people, they're going after queer people. And if they can do both at the same time, that's the holy grail. And that's why you got, Fox News and Trump and all this stuff in 2016 talking about the caravans of brown people are coming from the South. And you're absolutely right, John. You're absolutely right. And you said it so well. Thank you very much. Vince in Wellsville, Kansas. Hey, Vince, what's on your mind today?
A lot. Good day.
Hey.
One of the things I've been thinking about as a result of seeing your promotions for the Belly of the Beast in between your segments, I try to remember what I remember of the years after the Cuban Revolution when Kennedy was president.
Mm-hmm.
And there were people in this country. There was a man with a late-night television show named Jack Parr. And Jack Parr started a group, and his goal was the name of the group, Tractors for Cuba. And what he wanted to do was raise funds, and there were funds raised, to purchase tractors to send to Cuba so that the people in Cuba could reclaim their agricultural past and make it a strong future. And they were wanting to send tractors to Cuba.
This was post-59.
He said nothing negative about that. So what happened before the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Castro was actually looking for a world power to give some support so that his new government could survive? Something caused Kennedy to draw away from before all the big things we all know about. What could that be? I'm ignorant.
It was okay. Well, that's a great question, Vince. Just for people unfamiliar with the timeline, in 58, 59, really it was in 59, I believe, was the Cuban Revolution. Castro then reached out to Richard Nixon, who was vice president of the United States at the time, and said, we would like to align ourselves with the United States, but we want to have national health care programs and free education. We've got these specific things that we want to do. Nixon said, no way will we allow you to do that. That's because it'll create demand for that in the United States. And so Castro went to the Soviet Union. In 62 or 63, I think it was 63 was the Cuban Missile Crisis, as I recall. Jack Kennedy stood up to the Soviets and said, if you bring these missiles in, we're going to have a nuclear confrontation. And he backed them down. Then Jack Kennedy was assassinated in November of 63. And when that happened, immediately after the assassination, in my opinion, was conducted by the mafia, because Jack and his brother Bobby we'd gone from an average of around 10 to 12 prosecutions of organized crime per year from the 1920s right up until 1961. And in 1961, when Jack Kennedy became president, there were over 700 of them. In 62, there were over 800 of them. By 63, they were up to around 900. I think it was partly because Bobby was so offended by his own father's involvement in organized crime that he was such a righteous guy. They just went after the mob. So when Kennedy was shot, the first thing and we now know that the mob released this information, was this suggestion that the assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was somehow affiliated with the Russians. And in fact, Oswald actually worked for the number 2 mafia boss in America, Carlos Marcello, out of Louisiana, and who worked for Santo Trafficante, who was the capo de capo. And so for about 6 months, and I heard this from Bobby Kennedy's best friend and lawyer in person, for the first 6 months after Jack Kennedy was assassinated, most of the people in our federal government believed that Castro had it done. And that was why the whole cover-up had to happen. That's why the Warren Commission, that's why you saw Earl Warren with the tears coming down his face after he met with LBJ, because LBJ believed that Castro had assassinated Kennedy. And he believed that for at least 6 months. And so that, I would say that probably was a major turning point for our relations with Cuba. In number one, making us hostile to Cuba, but number two, also making us afraid of Cuba. And so we just kind of went into this position of, well, we're going to maintain this blockade, but we're not going to try to provoke them like Trump is trying to do right now. Did I answer your question, Vince? I'm running out of time here.
Okay, why would Kennedy suddenly reverse his position before all of the large things and the Russians?
Well, the Bay of Pigs, the Bay of Pigs invasion was scheduled by Nixon to run in October of 1960, and it was going to be the thing that Nixon thought was going to make him president. And they had to call it off because of weather. So Kennedy inherited this thing, and it was a complete mess, and that had a lot to do with it. Vince, I got to run.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Sorry, in my timeline, I had forgotten about the Bay of Pigs, which is a big deal. I mean, it was one of the major things that caused all this to happen. They thought that the assassination was repayment for the Bay of Pigs. Thank you. By the way, my writing partner, Lamar Waldron, Lamar and I wrote 2 books about the Kennedy assassination. And then Lamar since has written what I think is the definitive book. It's called The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination. And you can find it wherever you find fine books. Pedro in Bradenton, Florida. Hey, Pedro, what's up?
And welcome back from your vacation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question for you. You had reported several times in the past about Greg Palast and his report on the 2024 election, in which he concluded that that Kamala Harris actually had won if it hadn't been for the extreme voter suppression of 3 or 4 million people.
Yep.
And then I've heard you explain or comment on, at other times about her loss. And you give reasons, the messaging, the timeliness of the candidacy and all that. But you don't mention Greg Palast's conclusion that she actually had won despite all these deficits.
Yeah.
Just curious, have you changed your mind about the accuracy of his conclusions, or is it just a matter of,
Yeah, how do you square that circle? No, I get your question, Pedro. My take on it is that, between 3 and 4 million people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 didn't bother to vote in 2024 at all, just didn't even show up. And that created the space in which the Republicans, by suppressing another 3 to 4 million votes, could essentially steal the election. Now, the question then becomes, why didn't that 3 or 4 million people show up? And I think that part of it is that she only had 100 days to campaign, basically. Part of it is that she was doing a lot of that campaigning with people that are toxic to the Democratic base. She was running around with Liz Cheney and with billionaires making her pitch. Part of it was that she's not that good a public speaker, an orator. Part of it was that she and Joe Biden had been defending Netanyahu's slaughter of Gaza. And I think every single one of those variables, I think if you were to pull out any one of those variables, it might have gotten her over the edge where she could have overcome the voter suppression and become president. But the combination of them, along with, the just inherent racism and misogyny that is so it's a friggin' pandemic among white people in America, or at least white men. I think that's how we ended up with the outcome that we ended up with. So I don't see any of my positions as mutually exclusive of each other. I think they're additive. Does that make sense, Pedro?
Yeah, it does. It obviously it's a complicated scenario, obviously, and I guess I was wondering what your position was on that and on his conclusion.
I still agree with Greg.
Yeah, and I do too. I mean, I watched his documentary on it, Vigilantes 8, and he shows. And I worked as a poll watcher in the 2024 primary.
Oh, good on you.
I was shocked when I got my paperwork while at the polls. I was trained by the Democrats. When I was at the polls, I got some further instructions in which I could actually challenge any voter because of signature or address and all that. So there's so much of that going on.
There really is. Pedro, I'm out of time, but thank you. Thank you for the call, and good on you for showing up and being an election monitor. 10 minutes before the hour. Hey, Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. A lot of people wonder, where did this whole right-wing movement to basically gut our freedoms and end DEI and all this other, where did this all begin? It all started back in 1951 with a book called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot by Russell Kirk. And he argued that if the middle class ever got too big, you'd see young people and women and racial minorities all get up on their hind feet and start protesting and basically screwing up America. And in the 50s, you know, even Republicans thought he was nuts. But then the 60s happened and all those protests, and suddenly Republicans thought, yeah, he's right. We've got to destroy the middle class, or at least cut it back. And that was Reagan's mandate when he came into office in 1981. There's a whole article about this. You can read all the details. It's titled The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will. Over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. And welcome back. 9 minutes before the hour. Picking up your calls here. David in San Francisco. Hey, David, what's up?
Hey, well, thanks, Tom. In the destruction of the government that Trump's been doing with Doge, of course, they ripped apart the consumer fraud division and all sorts of things like that. I'm wondering if they've ripped apart the Department of Justice division that handles money laundering. Because if you start looking at Trump's fooling around with cryptocurrencies and probably, thinking about how he had sabotaged FIFA from the moment that the first team landed in America, what are the odds that they were doing gambling on games that they had, manipulated?
Yeah.
You remember he kicked out the first ref that got in the country, and then he locked up a whole team all afternoon at the airport, refusing them visas and whatnot.
Right. Because they were black people.
Sabotaging. Yeah, well, the idea of sabotaging games, to create a gambling advantage. And so money laundering, I'm wondering, has anybody tracked the money laundering aspects of Department of Treasury or Department of Justice?
All I know about that, David, is, last year I recall reading news stories and talking about it on this program, in fact, briefly, suggesting that many of the regulatory functions, criminal oversight, these things that were in the Department of Justice have been eliminated. A lot of those people have been fired. Many of them have simply resigned in disgust at what's going on, and many of them, particularly within the FBI, which is a large part of the DOJ, have been redirected away from things like white-collar crime. And in fact, I would predict if you Google, white-collar crime DOJ reductions, it'll pop right up. They've been reallocated away from white-collar crime, which, Trump is a white-collar criminal, as are most of the members of his family, toward immigration enforcement. And so I think that I'm sure that you will find that. And Trump has, allegedly made a lot of his living over the years money laundering. America is one of only 2 or 3 developed countries in the world that allows people to buy homes or buildings with cash and through shell companies. And so, Trump properties have been a major opportunity for money laundering for mostly Russian oligarchs for a long, long time, and Middle Eastern potentates as well. So I think that's what you'll find. Well, David, I want to get another call in here. Thank you for the call. Dave in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hi, it's great to talk to you. I was listening to your discussion with Sabrina Hake about the destruction of the federal agencies and firing agency heads. And I'm wondering what the possibility would be if the Democrats do retake Congress, that they could just vote to reauthorize all those federal agencies that Trump has destroyed, just recreate them, use the Article 3, Section 2 powers, under such exceptions that Congress shall make.
Yep.
And say that these you
can't rule on these things.
Can't be fired for cause.
Yeah,
except for cause, and just redo everything. And if the Republicans want to relitigate it and take it to the Supreme Court, they can knock themselves out.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that Democrats should consider if they retake Congress.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I'm sure that's probably pretty high on their list. Dave, thank you. That was a good one. Randy in Laramie, Wyoming. Hey, Randy, you have the last minute of the program. What's on your mind today?
Thank you, Tom. I think you're a great person, and I really appreciate your service. My question is, how do we get rid of Elon Musk? Can we deport him back to South Africa, and can we get his money?
I think that's, wouldn't that be nice? But I think it's long gone. I think he's so enmeshed in our political and economic.
Has he committed crimes in the USA?
In my opinion, he has. He's not ever been charged or convicted with any, and there were 34, as I recall, active investigations of him and his companies, some of which were criminal, going on when Trump put him in charge of Doge, and he eliminated all of those agencies or all of the people who were investigating him. All of those investigations have gone away as a result of his Doge time. So it'll be a hell of a lift. Randy, thank you for the call. Great question. Thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. That includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe. Eat your veggies, get your exercise, and I will catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We say fight back!